Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 80 of the Former Action Guys podcast, and I'm your host, Justin Kramer. And this week I have Daniel Gordon back on, talk about his time. You know, I just told him, I just got off with him, and I was telling him, like, he has got to have the most unique career path of anyone I've ever interviewed. For sure, anyone I've ever interviewed. I think anyone I've ever met, to be honest. If you didn't catch his first episode, it's episode 78. He talks about, you know, he came in as a bulk fuel specialist, wanted to go active duty. He was on reserves, wanted to go active duty, became an artillery officer, got attached to 1-8 for deployment to Mosul for the invasion of Iraq. And, you know, from there, they made him the weapons platoon commander, sent him to IOC also. So he went to infantry officers course, came back from that, had his MOS changed to intelligence officer, and then worked his way into second recon. And that's kind of where the first episode ends. So if you haven't heard any of that, episode 78, he goes into detail about all that stuff. And then this one we pick back up where he's you know, getting that intelligence MOS and going into recon. And we talk about his time at recon and then going to Fallujah in 2004 during the second push, the major Battle of Fallujah. And he was controlling fires. They had him there as a JTAC and stuff like that with recon. And he's a reconnaissance Marine at this point, not even an artillery officer. So he's done all these things. And then while he's during this Iraq deployment, not only did they do Fallujah, but he gets into talking about some boat raids that they did where they came in and did a little snoop and poop and taking dudes out. And just some of the different missions, going in and wearing like Iraqi outfits and stuff like that, going into the populace. Super, super interesting conversation. Really appreciate him coming on. And I honestly can't wait to have him come back on for a third time to sit down and talk through even more stuff that he's done. It's pretty wild. So thanks again to Captain Daniel Gordon for coming on and telling his story. And again, if you haven't heard the first half, I highly recommend you go back to episode 78 and take a look at that. It's extremely interesting. All right. Hey, for the podcast, I'm glad. I love the support. I'm glad everybody's listening and following. If you could do me a favor, if you're really enjoying the show, you know, share it with one person, tell them about it, or send it to them in a message, or maybe post it on your Facebook page or something like that. I don't charge people to watch or listen to the podcast. This is all free and stuff. So do me a favor. If you feel like you're getting something out of it, just share it with one person. That way, you know, that helps spread the word a little bit. And I want to say thanks to, I got another review on Apple Podcast from What You Hate 1212. It says, showing love to the little guys. As an 0861 8002, which is fire support man and JTAC in the Marine Corps, says, I love hearing stories from my community. We always hear about SEALs and SOF, but this is one of those podcasts that brings you stories from every level, from the strategic corporal up to the command major. It brings the last 20 years and sometimes even and further back to life. If you want stories about the individuals of war, listen to this podcast. Hey, I appreciate the review. I appreciate the kind words and stuff like that. You know, people that have been listening to the podcast for a long time have heard me say it multiple times, but there's so many people that we know, you know, and I say we, those of us that were in the military, there's people that we know that have done great and amazing things, but outside of the military, people just see them as the average Joe walking down the street. And I really believe that this podcast helps bring some of those stories to the forefront and get those stories out there that people should hear. You know, these aren't stories that are necessarily going to be in the history books because they're down at that tactical level. So it's not, you know, the big strategic thinking that they're going to put in history books, but that makes the actions, you know, I don't know. It's just something that needs to come out, and I'm glad I can facilitate it. I'm glad people like Daniel Gordon come on here to tell their story because, like, his story is so crazy, so interesting, that it's amazing that it hasn't come out prior to this podcast, and I just love doing it. And you're right, you know, most of the podcasts and stuff out there are like Navy SEALs or special operations guys, which is totally cool. And I'd totally love having, you know, I'd love having those guys on the podcast as well. Nothing wrong with them coming on and telling their story. But you're right, the average Marine, the average soldier and stuff like that did a lot of amazing things sometimes gets overlooked because they were never in the SOCOM community. But hey, man, thanks for the review. Again, for those out there, that's really the only way you can give a lot of feedback on the podcast is on Apple Podcasts. They allow reviews. So please go on there and leave a review. And share the show, and make sure to subscribe on Apple, on YouTube, on Google Podcasts, on all of them, because we're everywhere. And I think that's about it. Oh, yeah. Hit up my website, jkramergraphics.com, and my Instagram at jkramergraphics and at Former Action Guys. That's about it. Enjoy the episode.
Like I said,
all right.
Nothing matters without comm. I don't care how high speed we think we are.
I know, right? It's always a comm issue that will ruin a mission, you know? That's funny.
I say that all the time that, hey, the most important job in the Marine Corps is comm. Nothing else matters without it.
Dude, I used to tell my radio operators, I'm like, I do not envy your job at all. And I remember when I first got to 10th Marines as a scout and we would go out on field ops, I didn't know anything. So I'm just out there learning myself. And I was a sergeant. My radio operators for the FSCC, our Gunny Klein, would be like, he's just like yelling like till comm is up, like, and we're in the field. It was just like, get comm up, let's go. And I remember our guys were just so good that we would be up before anyone else. So he's like yelling at them because he couldn't get comm up. But the only reason was because no one else was up yet. Because we, because we used to do like a ton of OE drills and shit like that. And then like our radio operators were all really good. Like Jared Jones was my comm chief, Native American dude. He actually preferred to be called Indian. He hated being called Native American, which is funny.
Oh.
Yeah, he's like, fuck that. He's like, these white teachers come on the reservation and tell us that we're Native American. He's like, I'm a fucking Indian. I'm like, all right, dude.
All right,
whatever you want.
I'll call you shithead if you want.
Yeah, good people though. But yeah, dude, comm's always an issue. So, Daniel Gordon, man, welcome.
A Navajo guy that was when I was enlisted. I was at MOS school with.
Yeah, what did he prefer?
His last name was Red House, so he just called him Red House. He was his family were all code talkers and all that stuff. So his family, it was like tradition that they all went into the military. But man, this was back before cell phones. Okay, this was when MOS school. All we had was a damn payphone in the barracks.
Yeah.
And he would be on the phone talking, and his dad was a medicine man for the tribe. It was not allowed to speak anything but the native tongue, Navajo. So he'd be on the phone being like that.
Oh, really?
And I just sit there watching like, what in the hell is going on? He's like, yeah, my dad says we're not allowed to speak anything but our native tongue when we speak to him.
Huh. I wonder if his dad ever speaks English, like, ever.
I'm sure they do, but I just remember he said when I call my dad, when he talks to me, he's like, only Navajo speech is, or his dad was high in the tribe, so that was the rule that he's got to speak the language whenever he's talking to them.
That's cool though. That keeps that tradition, that part of their heritage alive. There's so few like Native Americans now, and
oh yeah.
I know Jared looked like a Native American. He actually, people thought he was a Hispanic or something like that. And he would tell me that when he went to Iraq, their translator didn't know how to like translate it to the Iraqis. So he just started calling him the savage. And he's like, what are you calling me? And he's like, because he didn't understand the word. And he's like, savage. He's like, what the fuck? Like, you're calling me a savage?
I like that better.
So it's pretty funny though. Yeah, it's cool. I used to give him shit. I'm like, do you think you were gonna come in and be a code talker, bro? Like, what the fuck? He was a good dude. I need to reach out to him. He got out. He was, he was up until that point. He was the best radio operator I had ever worked with. And he probably would be the best radio operator I ever worked with, possibly, or at least in that running. He's definitely like number 2 or 3. But he didn't go to the next level, I guess, because he was never like at a unit like Anglico where, you really get to see some comm like expertise come out, like guys making, those field expedient antennas and shit like that. And so for what he did, he was like the best dude I ever had at, I could have even asked for at 10th Marines. He ran his guys really well. Him, like Aguayo, we had a couple comm guys that were all solid dudes, and that's just something I think artillery, artillery guys take very seriously because comm, like you said, without comm, like, we're all worthless, right?
Yep.
None of it matters. So, man, thanks for coming back, though. Thanks for coming back on and doing this follow-up. For those that haven't heard your story already, you should probably go back to, I should have had this already up. I think it's episode 77 and hear the beginning. Oh, nope, 78. I almost said 78 and I thought I was wrong. Go back to episode 78 and, kind of covers the first part of your career up until the part where you'd come back from Mosul, from the invasion, off the Mew, and you were looking for what to do. And now you were moving from being an artillery officer to an intelligence officer. So I guess if you just want to pick up there, or if there's anything you want to touch on, maybe that you felt like we kind of went over too quick on the first half of your career, feel free.
We went through pretty pretty detailed. I mean, you know, Marines, we can get together and talk about stupid stuff all day.
For sure.
For endless hours. We could have kept going another 8. Now, I kind of was thinking about how I would break down the next part of the podcast, and I think it kind of goes from when I got back, but there's the main focus I'd say was probably Fallujah. There's kind of 3 phases. I think Pre-Fallujah, Fallujah Assault, and then Post-Fallujah was the kind of way out of my mind. I kind of 3 phases I broke it down, but to chronologically talk about it, like I said, I did get back from 26 MU. Was coming back. I did the reconnaissance screening. I actually had to do it twice. You know, it is what it is. had to do it twice. I went for a small time when I got back from 26 MU. I went over to the CAS trainer, the Combined Arms Support trainer. Where it's all fire support. Just as an interim waiting, I was like the CAS OIC, where people come in and learn fire support. I was there for a hot second, just in a transition, and then went over to 2nd Recon. The thing about my recon career is I did it kind of backwards. I had been in recon, I don't know, a year and a half, and done a deployment, went to combat, you know, was in combat as a reconnaissance officer, and then came back and went to amphibious reconnaissance school. So. Oh,
really? You didn't go through BRC before you deployed?
No, nope. I came over, took the recon indoc. They were going. I'd done my last tour with 1-8. Came straight in and went straight over as a recon officer with them for the assault on Fallujah 2. They were just
all right. Let's get people caught up that maybe are not going to go back and listen, you know, because some people aren't going to. You came in initially. You were a reserve Marine. You were a bulk fuel specialist. Decided and at some point you knew you wanted to go active duty, or you wanted more, right? So then you came in as an artillery officer. And you didn't really spend too much time with the battery, though, right? From there, you went to 1-8 as the weapons company, right? Initially you went over there to be the fire support guy, right?
Yeah, I was
weapons platoon.
Bravo company, the weapons platoon commander, and then I was the FIST team leader and the weapons platoon commander. Which people don't know, the weapons platoon commander is usually the FIST team leader. So usually your FO works for the FIST team leader in the infantry company, but I came over and was the weapons platoon commander and the FIST team leader. And then did that whole time as a weapons platoon commander in 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. Came back. I screened for recon. So you have to take the recon indoc. I did the interview with the executive officer. Enlisted Marines will typically do their interview at the sergeant major. But at the time for 2nd Recon, I did it with the Battalion XO. Did my interview with him, went to the CAS trainer just for a couple of months, and then came over to recon. And then we started our workup, got a platoon, did a workup, went straight over to Iraq. We didn't go straight over. We were in our workup phase. So that's actually when I went to JTAC school. So I came over, did the recon indoc, was in recon, platoon commander, went to JTAC school at that time.
So when you went over, since you hadn't gone through BRC and you were still, you know, you're a fires guy, and obviously they saw the benefit of that and sent you to TCP school. Did you go to LANT or PAC?
LANT.
Okay, so EWTG LANT, for those that don't know, it's the Expeditionary Warfare Training Group Atlantic. So that's one of the places that we go up in Little Creek to do that. So when you went over, were you kind of viewed as an attachment then? You were there as like a fires attachment for the unit, or were you there as like a part of the recon, like, you know, element?
I was a platoon commander, so I came over as a platoon commander. They had an air officer, Mumbles. Can't remember his last name. Keith was his first name, but Mumbles was his call sign. He was an F-18 fighter pilot. He was the FAC fires guy. Him and the OPSO did all the fire support stuff in the ROC, which is called the Reconnaissance Operations Center. So no, I came over as organic. For people who don't know this, is like anyone can screen to go over to reconnaissance. So my platoon sergeant my first platoon sergeant that I got in recon, he had been in recon since the beginning, but he came from the wing. He came over from the wing. Several of my squad leaders had other primary MOSs prior, but then they had screened for reconnaissance, came over. So once they come in, they have to go through the pipeline. They go through BRC, SEER, jump, come back pre-scuba. When they get a chance, they go through scuba school and all that. But as officers, one thing people don't realize is you come in, you could just come straight in as an officer, take a platoon, never go to ARS, never do anything else other than just come in as an officer. They hominis dominus. Your infantry officers training, which we backtrack. I did go to infantry officer school. is training enough to come in tactical wise as a reconnaissance platoon commander. So I just came straight in, organic, boom, you're a reconnaissance platoon commander.
So having done that, and then having spent a little time over there, done a combat deployment with them and stuff like that, do you still think that's a wise way to do it? Or do you think that officers that come over should go through the screening process first? In hindsight.
I think my time was a very specific thing because, like I said, there was another lieutenant that came over before me, John Connolly. He was in 310 with me. He was the FDO, another artilleryman that went over to Recon. He never went to ARS. He went straight over, did a workup, and then went on a MEU. I think he was 2-4 MEU.
Okay.
2-4 MEU and went out and did it. There's two caveats. You're asking, I think it's worth it? I do think now the way they have the 0307 MOS so that officers in reconnaissance have MOS credibility and they stay in the community. I think the way they do it now is they go through a screening, a pipeline, and go straight through. Everything about my career was not normal because of
not normal at all
because of the war. So because of the war that went on, I will say this: your tactics and level of training from infantry officers course is far superior than what you do as an 0321 reconnaissance Marine. You learn a lot of entry level skills as a reconnaissance Marine at ARS, but for me, ARS was just a rite of passage, a big suck. Are you tough enough to do this, and do you have the beginning aptitude for stalking, finning, amphibious, surveillance, comm suite? Do you have all those beginning capabilities that we're going to teach you in detail when you get to the teams? Kind of like how Buds is. It's just a rite of passage screen. Do you have the heart and mental fortitude to make it through this?
Yeah.
And then when you get to the teams and stuff and you go to the other additional follow-on schools, that's where you learn how to do stuff. But I think where I think it's good, what I liked about it is when I got back, I had been in reconnaissance, a year and a half, 2 years before I went to ARS. It builds a camaraderie and esprit de corps especially with the young enlisted Marines that come over. Several of my guys in my second platoon, my second tour for recon, I had gone through ARS with. I'm talking about lance corporals and sergeants. I went through amphibious reconnaissance school with them, so they've seen me at my worst. So they knew what I was made about and whether I was a pansy or anything you want to call it. They knew what I was made of. So I think that bond to go through something that really is tough, because it doesn't matter whether an officer enlisted at ARS, you all fucking equally suck. You're a rope until you finish your knots. You're not a reconnaissance Marine until you're done with that school. So to go through that, those hard times and trials and tribulations together builds more camaraderie. And I think I spoke about it last time on the last podcast. Not every officer gets to go through ARS. Some guys go to Ranger school because Ranger slots come up, and some guys go through ARS. And anytime it seems like more officers go to Ranger school for some reason at the time I was in. If you went to Ranger school, they're like, see, sir, he never went to ARS. That's why he's fucking up all this shit. Kind of a thing. There's that bond that builds when you go through ARS together. I think that's the most important part.
So you call it ARS. I've always heard it called BRC. Is there a difference, or are we talking about two different things?
Same thing. I got my stuff on the wall. It's called ARS, Amphibious Reconnaissance School. Was East Coast, was all at Fort Story, same place we go. It's right down the road. It's in I'm trying to remember the little base. It's like a historical base.
Little Creek.
It's Little Creek, Little Creek.
Or Dam Neck.
Dam Neck is the main base, but Little Creek is I'm sure where ARS is. So we had ARS, which is East Coast, and BRC was West Coast. So at the time they had two different ones. They called it ARS. I can go on about who thinks ARS is harder than BRC.
Of course.
It's kind of like MCRD versus Paris Island. The Marines for days will talk about it. Surf passage are harder here. This is harder there. If you're an East Coast guy, you just went to FM Lant to go to that. But that's where it was at. Now they have it all at one place. They don't have ARS anymore. It's all on the West Coast. It's all in one place.
Crazy. See, learn something new every day, man. This is why I like doing this.
One thing I want to say is, like, Marines, even when I was in, always would get upset, like, oh, this officer went to jump school or he went to dive school before me, and that's bullshit. The way the Marine Corps allocates funds is they don't allocate funds for both officers and enlisted together. They say these are the slots for officers, these are slots for enlisted. So when an officer goes to ARS or jump or dive, they're only for officer slots. When an enlisted Marine does that, it's only for enlisted. And some of the Marines would get upset being like, that officer took my jump slot. That's not allocated that way. The funding is only allocated for officer enlisted. So no one took anyone's slot for any schools. And it's just a misconception that was out there for ARS, jump, dive, sniper school, whatever that stuff, that they're taking my slot. But the way the Marine Corps allocates it, officers and enlisted are separate.
Okay. All right. So let's back up then. So you got back. So you showed up to Recon. You showed up to Second Recon. What was going through your mind? Like, holy shit, I made it. Like, how did I con myself from bulk fuel specialist all the way up to reconnaissance Marine that was also an artillery guy, was also an intelligence has an intelligence background too. So how did you feel when you finally got there?
Like I said, the reason I kind of did a pit stop at the cash trainer is I was waiting for my MOS to go from 0802 to fully blessed. I became an 0203 at that time. So the lateral move package went over. I became a ground intelligence officer and then went over. It was just kind of like I was very happy to be there. It was very nice to be there. Very, I would say this, every Marine there is like a mini platoon sergeant. You never have to tell these guys to PT, go work out, train. Every single one of those guys are so motivated. And a lot of the games and jackassery that you have in other units, cut your hair, shine your boots, iron your uniform, they want you to shoot, move, and communicate. And that's what those guys did. And I would talk to some of my peers, go have lunch with some of the other officers or something, like, hey, what your guys doing? I'm like, they're at the gym, they're doing this or they're doing that. And they're like, man, that's all you guys do. I'm like, that's what we get paid to do. We get paid to be ready now, not 6 weeks from now. So while their Marines are doing whatever they're normal doing, I didn't have to push my Marines. It was a good feeling just to finally have made it. Like I said, if my goal did go to Anglico or Recon, I had to piss off a lot of people to get there. I'm going to tell you, I tell Marines all the time, no one worries about your career like you. So
100%.
Artillery being the king of battle, they felt I was leaving them and it wasn't good enough. And it was never that. I go back to MOS credibility, had no MOS credibility. Went over there as the only way over. They didn't have the 0307 reconnaissance officer MOS at that time. So ground intel or infantry officer is the only way to stay in. And so where the rest of my peers were going to B billets and doing recruiting or drill field or staffing billets somewhere, I went right back in the fleet, platoon commander, recon, and was extremely happy. If I'd have spent my whole time in the fleet deploying, I would have been completely happy. I never cared if I did a B billet or staffing billet. I wanted to be a warfighter, stay with the Marines, and train with them and do that as long as I could.
Yeah, I was the same. I never... for B billet wise, only one time did I consider doing a B billet. I was like, but I was over in Afghanistan and I was like, when you're overseas, you don't think right. Your brain's all fucked up. You're thinking weird shit like, hey, maybe I'll go be a drill instructor. I considered that for a minute because they always tell us it's how competitive it is for promotions to staff. But then I kind of took a step back and looked and I'm like, dude, it's not competitive at all for 0861s. Like it's pretty easy to become a staff sergeant in 0861. Only, and I say easy, it's easy to get there only because the job is so like, you're always doing shit so much that so many people get out. They get tired and burned out. I mean, look at me. I did 12 years and got out. I was like, that was good for me.
Same here, 12 and out. And the same thing with me is intelligence MOS, you're pretty much going to, if you stay in, you're going to make lieutenant colonel because it's just a short MOS. They don't have a lot of people. So I would have picked up lieutenant colonel had I stayed in. That's pretty easily. They say colonel is a whole different story, but lieutenant colonel in some capacity and somewhere in the intelligence community, I would not have wanted to stay in intel or try to stay in reconnaissance, but they pretty much say once you're an 02 in any field, it's so short and the guys get out and have that TS-SCI clearance and they go do some G14 classified crap with the government somewhere else, they get paid so much more money that picking up lieutenant colonel is pretty much a given. Yeah,
that makes sense. So I like what you're talking about, how you got over there and everybody's like professional and stuff like that. And I think you can definitely see the difference in people when it's a group of individuals that want to be there. I say individuals, it's a team obviously, but every one of them volunteered to be there. Every one of them, not just volunteered to join the military, but volunteered to join, the recon community and go through the Haze Fest that is BRC or ARS and make it to their unit. And, it's cool. Those are just professionals. It's just a better environment. You have less of the guys that are just the negative dudes that are just shitty the whole time, complaining, that you just, what I'm talking about. And everyone that's listening to this that was in the military knows who I'm talking about. That 10% of people that's like dragging everybody down and just bitching the whole time. I probably started to become that guy at the end, my last year in, because I was so disgruntled, but it is what it is. But working in small teams is so much better because you have so much more say of what you're actually going to do. It's not like if you're a fire team in some infantry unit, you have very little say of what that fire team is going to be doing, or even that squad. Like the squad leader has some flexibility, but, they're still listening from higher. Well, in an Anglico team or a recon team, when you're a small element and, there's no more than 20 of you, there's always less than 20 of you there, it's easier for you to like plan your own training that you think is beneficial for your team, and you can shape stuff to actually like prepare your guys better, in a more, I guess, you can focus on the individual skills more and then work on those small team skills, and it just makes it all better. Plus everybody wants to be there, and both units, Recon and Anglico, are usually, from what I've seen, well funded. So going to the range is not a problem. Going to shoot's not a problem. And when it becomes a thing like that where you're shooting all the time, a couple times a month at least, then the guys just know what to do. You don't have to tell them what to do. You just show up and they jump out of the truck, start setting up the range, get the, all the stuff. And it's just it is a good environment, and it's hard to, that's why I talk about being at Anglico so much, because of that small team environment and how much better it is. I loved my time at 10th Marines. I had a great time. The group I had there was probably the tightest, I think they were probably even tighter than my Anglico team, honestly. But we just didn't get to do all the cool shit that we got to do at Anglico that made even more memories. We got to go to Fort Bragg, do Bragistan twice a month, or twice a year. So, it is what it is. So when you got over there, go ahead.
I would say, regardless if they come from, you have a recon baby that comes out of SOI, as we call them, and straight to recon. A majority, more often than not, I saw a good mix of guys that come from other MOSs, so they worked their asses off to get there. Mm-hmm. And everyone wanted to be there and to train. And you talk about shooting and stuff. My second platoon sergeant, Gunnar Rivera, he was a jump master, dive master, SOTG, shooting instructor. We'd go to the shooting houses for our workup and shoot 20,000 rounds per man per week. You get sick of shooting, but you miss a bullet trap once, it's a write-up. You miss a bullet trap twice, you can be off the team. They can say, hey, you're not going to make it. So everyone wanted to play and everyone wanted to get out there and do stuff, because everyone, enlisted officers, everyone had worked their asses off to get there. And when I went over to Recon, like I said in the last episode, the last podcast, for some reason, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, we had more officers come from 1-8 after that MEU come over to Recon than any other regiment. We had Lieutenant Lee, myself, Lieutenant Noble, Lieutenant Cruz. So you're talking 4 lieutenants from one regiment, one battalion, 3 of us from one company. But our company commander is Recon, our battalion commander is Recon, so he had some pull.
That's cool. Having a friend on the inside, I guess, like that to like ease the transition over, to make it a smoother process rather than having to fight your way, the whole time. That's cool. You have somebody that helped you guys out like that. It's funny you mentioned shooting 20,000 rounds like that. It's hard for people that have never gone, to a shoot like that to fathom that much ammo being shot. And it's funny, I talked to one of the guys that was over at Recon that I used to hang out with on the MEU, and he was like, dude, we just shoot so much. He's like you said, it's like you get tired of shooting, your hands hurt from loading ammo. He's like, but that's how we become surgical shooters. Yes. He's like, we will shoot, like where I want to put the round is where it goes. And it's also a thing for people that aren't in the shooting community at all. You have to shoot that much to be surgical. You can't, like, if you take a couple weeks off or a month off from shooting, you're gonna be a little off a little. It's just one of those things you have to do.
Yeah, it's a perishable skill, and you don't use it, you lose it. It's not something that stays with you to be that good and that precise. You have to do it all the time. And I mean, here's the funny thing is, you want to think like it's only shooting live rounds. My platoon sergeant would take the guys out and do drive fires on the snap-in barrels outside in the back of Recon for hours. The guys aren't bitching about going out there and snapping in and doing drills and mag changes and how your gear is set up. I mean, they live, eat, and breathe that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You
Well,
know?
I think someone, guys in a unit like that understand the seriousness. Like, there's lessons learned, and there's people that have come before you that have learned. Why relearn these lessons? So it's
Yeah.
It's easier to teach a group like that because they understand I think it's closer to home. The violence of action is closer to home, so they know they need to be ready for that. Whereas, like, if you're an admin clerk at IPAC, like, okay, I'll go shoot my rifle once a year. Like, what's the big deal? Because you're not on the edge of always being called up to go do something crazy, where those guys could be. What kind of different? Can you kind of talk through some of the different weapons training you did get to do while over there, like some of the stuff you fired and how you guys worked different weapons within your reconnaissance elements?
The way our armory and everything is set up, everyone sees us with MP5s or M4s, or if we're using an AK-47. We train on non-traditional, conventional weapons, so that if we're over there in an area of operation, we can pick up an AK-47 and employ it, a RPG and deploy it and understand how to operate it. You basically mix out your kit, which is what missions you use when you see the different. It's not like a little toy that comes with every freaking whiz bang and wham wham and zoom zoom. You tailor your mission for what you're going to do. If you're doing, dive ops and you want, say, a more concealable weapon, if you're doing lockouts on subs, you may take an MP5 instead of an M4. So it's basically, we get to train on everything you see in the Marine Corps, M16s. We have M4s and 203s. I carried an M4 with a 203 because I was a JTAC and because I used it to mark. I carried a mix of HE and smoke for JTAC reasons with my M4. Every platoon, sniper capabilities. It's a lot of guys go to sniper school to become snipers, but a lot of their goal to become snipers is to come over to reconnaissance. I'd say almost everybody in our platoon, I'd say the bulk of my guys were snipers. Every team leader was a sniper. My platoon sergeant was a sniper. So that's an employment method. Jump, dive. They're just insert or extract methods on how you can get in somewhere. Same thing with the weapons capabilities. Every AT4s, Mark 19s, 50 cals, 240s, saws, the squad automatic weapons. We use the little short compacted ones for a little bit more room clearing. So every weapon you see in the Marine Corps, we employ and we practice and we train on for shooting.
So when you were getting ready for your deployment, when you guys started to work up for Iraq, did they tell you where you guys were going? And two, what kind of specific workup, like, training did you do for where you were going?
We did Fort Polk down in Louisiana, and we did Mojave Viper out at 29 Palms.
Okay.
So Fort Polk is really cool. It's an Army base, and they have everything there. If they tell you an Su-37 anti-aircraft missile system is going to be in the area, you're going to see that. If you're going to see an Mi-24 Hind flying over, it's a Russian Mi-24 Hind. If it's a T-80 tank, you're going to see it. Maybe not T-80; those are kind of advanced. But if it's a Russian tank, you're going to see those. They have all these Russian tanks and Russian vehicles, and then even some of them, the aerial crafts aren't always. They make them look like a Mi-17 or a Hind. And then they have role players that come out in all their garb and they speak Arabic and they go through the whole gambit of role playing. It's actually, at that time, was very specific towards meet and greet, talk to the local sheikh imams, find out who the bad guys or who the non-locals are, winning the hearts and minds kind of a thing, and then finding the bad guys and capture, kill them. So we went, like I said, our main focus was Fort Polk for workup. And then Mojave Viper out in 29 Palms, which is very all scenario driven at that time. And as far as where we were going, we knew that we were going to reinforce, because it's just a rotation: first recon, second recon, third recon, just a return. So when I was there, I was with First Marine Division the whole time. It's just where Second Recon's rotation fell. It's not like Second Recon's with Second Marine Division. It's just we just keep rotating because there's only 3 units. I tell people all the time, like, there's 3 recon units. There's 3 recon companies on first East Coast, West Coast, and Okinawa. That's it. So there's not a lot of guys. You basically got 9 units in the entire Marine Corps to get in and to do reconnaissance for recon community, not counting Force or MSOB or MARSOC now. because they were going to be getting, a lot of people don't know this, but they were going to be getting rid, for several years, they're going to get rid of reconnaissance altogether. Sometimes force completely went away, and recon was the only mission. When I went over, I was going to screen to go over to force, but force was going away at the time. They were talking about completely disbanding force, and all the force guys were jumping into 2nd Recon Battalion because force was getting, they were going to tank force, completely get rid of force. So my platoon all the platoon sergeants came from force, every single one of them at the time. And then no one was trying to get into force because force was like, okay, force is being dead. Marine, 2nd Recon, the battalions were the main effort in doing stuff. So we just got told we were going to go reinforce relieve 1st Reconnaissance and take over their mission in Fallujah. We did not know at the time that we were going to be assaulting Fallujah for Fallujah 2. We were just going over there to reinforce 1st Reconnaissance Battalion.
Okay. So JRTC, is that where you guys did the Joint Regional Training Center out at Fort Polk? I've been out there. My Anglico team went out there and attached to the 501st for a training evolution. Fort Polk, man, that's way out there. That's for people that don't know. I guess for the Marines that have never been out there, you can kind of think of it as an EMV, but like in the pine trees and shit. And they, like you said, they have a lot of foreign like vehicles and stuff, and they do the laser tag kind of thing out there too. When you're in the box.
We had the Miles gear on everything.
The Miles gear, yeah.
We also went to Fort AP Hill.
Okay.
That was.
I've actually never been up there. I know a lot of the infantry units do rotations up there. I from what I understand, it's kind of like what 10th Marines would go out to Bragg for Rolling Thunder. The infantry battalions go up to AP Hill for like a similar kind of thing, a month-long exercise annually.
That's
or something
also
like
where.
That.
And ARS, we do our Hell Week is at Fort AP Hill. So we do all our for our Hell Week, which Buds call it Hell Week. We call it Patrol Phase. That's where we do it. So every reconnaissance Marines hates that fucking place because it's where we go through hell together.
That's funny. It's funny you talked. It's also funny. I mean, kind of. I don't know, whatever, that you talked about how them getting rid of force recon and recon in general. I just read an article the other day talking about the same thing, saying like, why do we still have this element that's only here for going on Muse, basically? Like that's I don't want to say that's all they're doing, but that's like almost all they're doing is going on Muse. And I guess that's like what a lot of units are doing as well. But I saw an article the other day. If there's any recon guys listening, I don't want you to think I'm downgrading your mission because I know there's other guys doing other things in other places. But I saw something the other day was talking about how they made during this whole force restructure may do away with some of the reconnaissance elements and then have them basically organic to the battalions. Like you have a recon platoon within a battalion or something like that. And that's where it comes. And I'm like, I don't know, man. They're doing so much weird stuff right now with the Marine Corps. I don't know if you've heard that or not.
I can shed some light on this because it goes back to the 80s and SOCOM, when SOCOM came around, and how this all went down. For years, we're going to get rid of recon. We're going to keep reconnaissance. We're getting rid of force. We're keeping battalion. We're getting rid of battalion. For years, it's been this way. I don't know how it is now with MSOB and MARSOC. I've been on some links where guys say, oh, so MARSOC's better in the screening process. I'm talking about from my time in. From my time in, and when I was there, real quick, in the Special Forces community, you have tiers. You have a Tier 1 asset, Tier 2 asset, and a Tier 3 asset. So you have levels within the SOCOM community. In the 80s when SOCOM was created, the Marine Corps was going to do the amphibious part of SOCOM. And what happened was, and the Marines and the Navies did more of your frogman, basic underwater demolition. They didn't do as much direct action CQB stuff at the time. They still did it. But the main effort for SOCOM at the time was going to be Marine reconnaissance. The Marines, being elitist that we are, Marines said, no, not all Marines are special. We're all just as good. Recon's no better than anyone else.
Every Marine's a rifleman.
Right, exactly. So they said, we're not going to play. When they said that to SOCOM said, fine, Marine recon, you're out. Navy SEALs, you have the direct action CQB. They tailored BUDS off of Amphibious Reconnaissance School because of that, because that capability at the time wasn't as large in the SEAL community. That's why SEALs changed their BUDS to what we know it today. They tailored a lot of stuff after Amphibious Reconnaissance School because Marines said we're not going to play. And for years, Marine reconnaissance was treated like a second-rate SOCOM citizen. The SOCOM community loved us, but our own organic Marine Corps always said we were cavalier cowboys, didn't want to deal with us until really 2006. We got absorbed into SOCOM, and the reason that happened is because of all of Afghanistan and Iraq. Marines reconnaissance would go out there, and honestly, people are like, oh, there's a big difference between force and battalion. At my time, there was not, because you got whatever mission you could. If you were a reconnaissance battalion, force reconnaissance, it was just who got the mission at what time. And every Marine goes through the same ARS. There's no different ARS for force. There's no different ARS for reconnaissance battalion at the time. Everyone goes through ARS. Everyone goes to the same jump, dive, sniper school. It's just force had a tendency to have older team leaders that had been around a little bit longer. When I was in battalion, all the force guys came over to battalion because force was going away. So my entire battalion was mainly force guys. So whenever SOCOM got created and we were in Iraq, Marines, the reconnaissance community, you're kind of like a bid position in SOCOM. So SEALs, Delta, SF, reconnaissance will go into a mission in SOCOM and say, I can do this mission in this amount of time with this much risk, with this much personnel. And what Marines do, they would go in and underbid everyone. I can do this in 50 seconds with those 3 Marines, a rubber band, and a rubber boat. I'll go now. And they're like, Marines just underbid everybody. Okay, Marines go. And then a lot of the higher level general officers, I'll say, in the SOCOM community kept going, why do I got to ask the Marine Corps to use reconnaissance? I want to use them how we use SOCOM, so I don't want to have to ask permission. And I'm probably getting way big blue arrow stuff, macro picture here. They got tired of doing that, so there was a couple of generals from the reconnaissance community that said, hey, we're done with this. We're going to absorb reconnaissance into SOCOM. And that started 2006. And then they wanted to say, hey, now we're going to start a legit career path. Marines who are in reconnaissance, stay in reconnaissance, officers stay in reconnaissance. Because the thing that would happen, you'd get 0321s, which is a reconnaissance Marine. They come into recon, then they got to go to the drill field. Then they got to go to recruiting. They got to go all these places. And you train this highly specialized person, and you lose all their skills every so often. So SOCOM's like, no. Just like we do in SEALs and in SF and the other battalions, we are going to make a career path for these guys that we spend so much money and training on. And since then, they're still trying to tailor that. They got Recon and MSOB and MARSOC. They really just need to say, hey, reconnaissance community, you're all going over to SOCOM. Because I've talked to some of the guys that are MARSOC, and they have their new pins. It's a eagle with a knife and a shield with stars on it. Instead of the dual cool jump and dive wings, they still have those, but it just signifies who went to the operator school. They're like, listen, we just tailored all
TSO badge.
Yeah, all of our schools and stuff is very similar. We just call it this now. They really just need to push all the way over, and like they're not Marine reconnaissance. Sometimes they're Marine raiders. And until Marines fully absorb and go to SOCOM 100% commit, I think you're going to have this wishy-washy back and forth. Because all of our schools, I was at ARS and had Hungarian Special Forces with me, and there was I know there's been Navy SEALs that have gone through ARS. We, I think the only school we really kind of stayed just Marine Corps, sniper school, jump or dive school now. They changed dive school, Marine combatant divers, just Marines.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because it was a joint school, right?
Well, yeah, you used to have the silver bubble. The silver bubble was a jump bubble, was a Navy dive bubble. And what they said is a prerequisite for Marine combatant diver, which is different than just a dive bubble, because you'd have a guy that does a re-enlistment or re-sign his commission. I want to go to dive school, and you'll see a guy with a silver bubble. But a prerequisite for the gold Marine combatant diver is amphibious reconnaissance school. There is no way to get the gold Marine Corps combatant diver pin. A prerequisite is amphibious reconnaissance school. So that's everyone you see that has a gold Marine combatant, and they changed the pin. They made it like more.
Yeah. It's very, even when I was in, it was very rare you'd run into somebody that had the silver pin. And it was like, what is that? And it was one of those things where no one really knew. So everyone's like, well, no, that just means he's scuba qualified. He's not actually this qualified. It was like.
It's the same shit. Like our master guns. Our master guns, he was ancient at the time. He had a silver bubble. I think he had to go back to, at the time, they say, okay, this is what you got to do to go back and get your gold Marine combatant diver pin, is they wanted them to do a 10 or 15K fin in the ocean in a certain amount of time. That was one of the big things. And Master Gun's like, fuck that. I'm not going back and doing a 10 or 15K dive. I'm fucking 45 years old. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. This guy's like Ranger school, jump master, dive master. He's like, nah, I'll just keep.
I'm done proving myself.
Right. He's a dive master, but you're going to say he's not there. There's no difference really. It's just they said, hey, to get the gold bubble, you're going to have to go. You have to go through amphibious reconnaissance school to get that bubble. And there were some people that were grandfathered in.
It's weird. I knew when I first checked into First Anglico, the guy I was replacing was walking me around the company and was like, "Oh, this is Gunny Eason, blah blah blah." And I'm looking where it was on a Friday, so everybody was in chucks, and I was in my alphas obviously. And this guy had jump wings and a gold bubble, and I'm like, "Is this dude like a lap move recon guy? Like, why is he at Anglico?" And, I'm just talking to him like, whatever. And then we walk away and I'm like, who is he? Like, who's that guy? And you're like, oh, he's the admin chief. And I'm like, what? And I guess he was an admin chief over at Recon. And at some point they let him go to these schools. They're like, hey, we have a spot. Yeah. He's super moto guy, super fit. Like this dude, he's like one of those guys you see in uniform. You're like, oh, he could probably fucking rip my head off. He's like one of those dudes. And I guess he worked his way into going.
ARS then he had to go to get the dive bubble.
It's crazy.
Dive bubble.
It's crazy that I saw that
our adjutant in 2nd Recon went through ARS jump and dive and was a reconnaissance platoon commander for our entire combat tour because we didn't have enough officers. So
for someone like him, like when you come back and they're like, all right, you did what we need you to do, does he go back to being an ADJ or do they let him stay over in the Recon community?
No, Recon is a smaller community. It's typically filled with infantry officers, will come from an over MOS. He didn't get to stay. I don't remember where he went. He wanted to stay, but at the time, I think he would have been able to stay now.
Yeah.
Now we have the 0307.
Yeah, when did they start doing that? I know you mentioned that. I hadn't heard that before, actually.
I don't know. I had some friends email me a while back, and I had, I think he's Lieutenant Colonel or Colonel Homiak, who's I think he's 2nd Recon OIC right now. I was looking at the MAR admin that comes out. It's all the MAR admins and NavMax that come out, and I was reading him and another couple lieutenants. Once that MOS came out, they received that 0307 MOS. I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago they said that. And the reason being is because when I went through ARS and I was in the reconnaissance community, officers come and go. Recon is ran by the enlisted Marines. Officers come in. A lot of times if officers get a bad rap, if they come in and go to jump dive, they call them badge hunters. They get their dual cool and they do their time and then they bounce and they leave. They don't stay in the community. And the reason why is there's no MOS, there's no 0307 at the basic school to get reconnaissance Marine, to get reconnaissance officer. So now they have that. So now I haven't talked, a lot of my peers are out or I can't get a hold of them that may still be in because a lot of those guys won't have Facebook or nothing. They can stay in the community, and now you have some leadership as officers, which will bring back Recon staying in SOCOM, because as high as an enlisted Marine may go to sergeant major, the influences at the level of SOCOM are general officers. You need those guys to pull the strings to say no. Reconnaissance needs to stay in SOCOM. So you get these MOS credibility guys, 0307s that stay in the community. They will make sure Recon stays true to Recon, stays in SOCOM. So now you have, if a Marine wants to come in and they want to screen, I think as an officer, you want to come in and you want to get a guaranteed tryout for reconnaissance. I think you can get a guaranteed reconnaissance for the MARSOC community to try out. And now you get officers that stay in SOCOM, so you have continuity of enlisted and leadership.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Even though I went through ARS, I don't have 0321 as an MOS in my DD 214. On my schools, it shows that my reconnaissance course and all that stuff, but we don't get a secondary MOS as an 0321 at the time I was in. It just shows we went to reconnaissance schools and stuff like that. So now they have some MOS credibility and they stay in that community. Besides, I was running out of room on my DD 214 for MOSs. I mean, they would have had to fucking change the font and put it down below in the
page 2. See page 2 for further entries. Yeah, what a bummer for that adjo. He was probably like, damn it, now I got to do all this cool stuff. Now I got to go back to like shuffling papers around and preparing for changes of command and shit like that. Well,
I told you we had an 04, a Lago that came over, and he was the S4 Zulu. We had an S4 Alpha, which is like a backup lieutenant to the S4 captain. With an S4 Zulu that had no job in the force shop, he became our QRF platoon commander and 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion 4th Reconnaissance Battalion out of the reserves out of Billings, Montana, had a bunch of reserve Recon Marines came over. He got a whole platoon of reserve Recon Marines, and they were our quick reaction force. And he was a reconnaissance. He never went to ARS. He did go to jump school with me, but he never went through ARS or anything. Never went through infantry officers course. And he was the QRF, quick reaction force. Whenever the rest of the company or platoons got into fights in Fallujah or around Fallujah, he was our reinforcement because other platoons or companies were engaged in their own area of operation. And he did his whole time. That guy got in as many firefights, I would say more firefights than any of the recon platoons outside of the Battle of Fallujah. And then he came back. His name is, I won't say his name because of what he does now, but he came back and he actually went to an 04 billet down in Florida for something. He was doing like really pogass shit. And I'm like, man, Tim, to go from this to that, he goes, man, it's such a big jump. But
and no one, and what's really shitty about that though is that no one where you're at can understand what you just did.
No.
You know what I'm saying? And then if you even talk about it, then people start thinking, well, okay, he's going to fucking start telling us stories about recon again. You know, so and that's what happens to guys, and guys end up not telling their stories anymore. You know, they stop talking about it because they feel like they're, you know, bragging or something like that.
I would say there were 6 years I went after I got out of the Marine Corps that I didn't say anything about anything because I always felt like it sounded embellished. I was bragging, and it just, I didn't,
100%, man. I'm still like that.
Talk to anyone. And my wife was actually a big proponent of me saying, when are you gonna talk about stuff, because you never say anything. And I'm like, I don't know, you're really taught to be a silent professional, and I'll bag on the SEALs, whereas every SEAL you meet is, hi, Lieutenant Gordon, Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 2. They all want to talk about it, but Delta Force, SF, Marine Recon, you're really taught to be that silent professional, and no one's taught to brag about it. And I think it goes back to all the 80s movies bullshit. My dad was a SEAL. My dad was a SEAL before there were SEAL teams. He hates the fucking glory and Hollywoodness of the SEALs. He goes, that's bullshit. We're not SEALs. We're fucking frogmen. My dad's passed away now, but he wouldn't talk about it at all. Talk about wanting to be a silent professional. He would not talk about it at all. So that's why I never talked about it. You're just taught, hey, you're a silent professional. You don't brag about it. You know, it's got in the Recon Creed, it says, you know, Recon Marines can achieve what others can only imagine, and they drill that into you, like, hey, you don't have to brag. You just show people what you're capable of. Exactly.
Yeah. Show them your skills. Like, your skills will talk for you. Yeah, for sure. You know, it's I understand, like, I can't say anything because I'm running a podcast talking about the military. So, I can't say anything about being a silent professional or anything like that. But I think for a lot of guys in those communities, and I'm just, I'm speaking just what I think. I don't know if this is true. You can tell me how it sounds. But I think, after a while, junior enlisted guys and just regular dudes that have gone out and done some crazy stuff, after they're done with their service, they go back home and they go back home and get another job or do whatever, do whatever they're going to do with their life and just live it on and not really talk about it or make any money off of it or anything like that. And then you see all these general officers that are out writing books, or they're on TV, or they're all doing this stuff. And I see why guys look at that and go, why can't I get a little piece of that? Like, why can't I tell my story? Why can't I become the professional that's on TV talking about, hey, this is why this action is crazy, or this is why. And honestly, they probably should have more, less general officers and more like if you're, not junior enlisted, but maybe some NCOs and staff NCOs. But I don't know.
Who fights the fight in the wars? It's your NCOs and your company grade officers.
Yeah.
So your company grade officers are your NCOs of officers, the best way to explain it. Once you're a field grade and flag and general officer, you're not out there in the mix, but your NCOs and your company grade officers are the ones that are in the mix. And I saw several lieutenants and people who got out and wrote books and did stuff, and that was never my get down. Like I said, sometimes I felt like an enlisted Marine wearing a officer uniform a lot of times, and you go from dual cool chest candy walking around on wherever you're at and people know that guy's reconnaissance to back in the civilian world, and every civilian pisses you off and people don't give a shit that you were recon or whatever you were. It's like, hey, that's great, get to the end of the line and fucking get your coffee like everybody else, fucker. There is none of that
as they should though.
Yeah, there's none of that. There's no recognition. I think some guys come out, and I say this, some guys come out and they feel like sometimes a sense of entitlement, or they miss a lot of that stuff, and it's like you got to recreate that for yourself, and you're never going to find it. You're never going to find that esprit de corps, that bondness, that closeness. You can't ever be as close to anyone that you went through combat with. You just can't do it. No. And some guys, they look for that the whole time, and so sometimes they push all that down. They stop talking about it. They don't tell anyone about it, and no one knows.
You're right, though. I mean, having certain, like having badges like your dual cool or wearing your chucks and people seeing that, oh, this guy's done shit, it gives you a little bit of like, it elevates your status a little bit. Yeah. People just know like, oh, okay, this guy's legit. Like he's not some just average dude. And I could see how guys get out. And for the people that are listening to this that are still in, honestly, if you get out, it'd be a surprise if someone even knows what recon is, let alone like being able to tell the difference between what a guy that spent 4 years being on a ship doing nothing did compared to like a MARSOC operator. The civilian world has zero idea of, honestly, and they probably all think more people are doing everything like what Recon Marines do and less of what the guy sitting on ship doing nothing does. They all think from what I've seen, they think everybody's been in combat, everybody has PTSD, and it's a shitty stigma, honestly, but no one fucking cares. So if you think you're going to get out and brag about it and people are going to care, they do not.
The other branches, if you tell someone I was in the Navy, Army, or Air Force, they always ask you what you did a lot of times. But if you say you're a Marine, everyone thinks you're a snake eater and a warfighter. So you get that reputation just by saying you were a Marine. So I think that's where the aura of reconnaissance, if I tell someone I was in recon, they have no idea or something. A lot of times if someone doesn't understand, I will say it was Marine Special Forces. So they may understand what that is. And
kind of contemplate. Yeah, they could put two and two together like, oh, you're not just a regular Marine.
Which people don't realize this. When I say there was tiers, tier 1 assets in Special Forces, tier 2. So your tier 1 assets are Delta, MARSOC platoon, SEAL Team 6, Dev Group. Those are your tier 1 assets. Your tier 2 assets in SOCOM are your regular Green Berets, your regular SEAL teams, and your Marine reconnaissance units.
And Rangers.
No, actually Rangers are tier 3.
Really?
Rangers are a tier 3 Special Forces asset. And not only are Rangers a tier 3 Special Forces asset, but when the Marine Infantry battalions become MUSOC qualified, that Marine BLT is a tier 3 level asset for SOCOM.
Really? Special operations come.
So they can do MSPF trailer platoons, and they can actually be a trailer platoon, an outer cordon, or a backup for a soft level unit. And I'm going to tell you right now, the soft guys, if they're anywhere in an area and they got a regular infantry or army unit, but they got a Marine unit, they'll pick that Marine unit all day with their backgrounds. And Chris Kyle talked about it when he was in SEAL teams, when he went to Fallujah and the Marine infantry were there, their level of training. He's like, give me these guys all day long over, no offense, the Army regular infantry, because their level of training is at a different level. And so a lot of people don't realize that there's a tier system even in SOCOM. And Delta is actually every branch of Special Forces. You can get a tryout for Marine Recon, Army, Navy, Air Force just to go to Delta and retain your branch, but you're in Delta, which I'm getting way in the weeds with the soft community now.
No, I think that's a misunderstanding a lot of people have, is the cross missions and stuff. I told a kid, I remember when I was at First Anglico, I got a boot that came in. And he came into the Marines because his family kind of like pressured him into it. I think his dad was in the Marines, and I think that may have been the family lineage or something like that. But he really wanted to become a Navy SEAL. So his plan was, hey, I'm going to do 4 years in the Marine Corps, and then I'm going to go over to the Navy and try to become a Navy SEAL. And I'm like, dude, I get what you're trying to do. I'm like, I respect it. I was like, but here's what you need to think about, man. I was like, if you leave the Marine Corps and go over to the Navy to go become a Navy SEAL and you don't make it, I'm like, now you're a fucking sailor, chip and paint, man. Yes. You're a fucking regular dude. They're going to pick a job for you. Like, that's not maybe you have a little sway because you have 4 years of time in the Marine Corps, but at the end, you're not going to be in the Navy SEALs. You're going to be a fucking sailor doing some shit that you probably didn't want to do. I was like, now, if you stay here, you can try out for MARSOC. I was like, you don't know anything about MARSOC because you're a PFC, and no one outside of the Marine Corps really even knows what MARSOC is or does because it's still so new. Yeah. This is a unit that's been around for less than 15 years at this point. So people are still kind of confused on who that is or whatever. And I'm like, you don't really understand who these guys are. I was like, if you're wanting to get into the SOCOM community, do your time, become an NCO, and then request to go over there or try to go do a tryout for that. I was like, and then once you get up in the levels, like you make it, man, I'm like, you're going to see you're working with those people all the time. Like you go out and work with a SEAL team, or you'll go out and work with an SF team, or you'll do cross training with a foreign special unit, like that's just how it works in that community as they go up. Now, obviously individual missions will have an organic, like, hey, here's the SEALs going in to do their organic mission. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be an attachment from it. I mean, look at Air Force CCTs. Those guys get attached to everybody, so stuff like that. It's like there's a lot of cross-pollination. What's that?
They get the best job as JTACs. They get to go in, have fun, and bounce.
Something I found out, we worked with some upper tier guys on one of my MEUs, and I talked to one of their dudes, one of the CCTs, and he's like, yeah, not every CCT is a JTAC. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I thought they all were. And that's kind of where my first like, oh, okay. So there is kind of a difference. There can be, I guess it's not even maybe, and this is obviously, this information is a few years old. At the time, I think he was saying that there's actually more CCTs that aren't JTACs than there are that are JTACs. And I was like, huh, because they already have so much other shit
to do spec ops stuff, to get with a soft team, to get with a SEAL team, a Delta team, or Green Beret team, or Recon team. All the CCT guys that I talked to said, man, they fight for those missions because every Navy, Army, Marine Corps unit, they have their own JTACs. They have their own medics if they're PJs. So if you're going to go in the Special Forces community and you're going the Air Force as a PJ or a CCT, you really got to fight and claw to try to get involved in any legit soft stuff, because especially now with there being a less combat operations.
Yeah.
You may get all the high level training, jump, dive, free fall school, all that stuff, EOD. But to get out there, why does a SEAL team, a Recon team, or an SF team, when they have their own medics and own JTACs, it's just why do they need them? They have their own organic guys. So I tell people, if you want to go to the Special Forces community in the Air Force, you're going to do a lot of cool training, but it's going to be a fight to get involved in any legit teams, because you are always an attachment. You are never like a main effort. You're never, they look at you second-rate soft citizens, so to speak.
That's too bad. I have a guy, I don't know if you've heard of him or not, BK Actual. I did his podcast, or we did a commentary for the vice presidential debate a couple weeks ago. He does a news podcast, and he's a PJ, and I'm going to have him on the show here at some point. He's going to come on and talk about, the PJ world, the AFSOC world, and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of someone from that community to come on and talk about their thing. Yeah, man. So back to your time when you guys got told, hey, we're going to Iraq. Did you guys do any kind of mission specific training and stuff like that? Can you talk about kind of what you prepared for, and then let's talk about when you got there and what you guys actually were doing?
I would say we were still in the frame of mind of everyone that had gone over. It was an infantry frame of mind. Infantry unit, go out, mounted patrols. You're basically a cop. Go out in the AO, in the area of operation, live with the local populace, and be a beat cop. Who's the bad guys? Who are the good guys? Because I tell people, if you're in California, but you got a guy in your neighborhood that sounds like he's from Louisiana and he's Cajun, you automatically know that guy's not from here. Even though he's speaking English, they knew the difference between a guy that was speaking their language and someone that was Chechen or someone that was from another place. So that's what it was. It was basically being a beat cop to go over there. So that's we did. And then we did hearts and minds stuff. I had $70,000 equivalent of Iraqi money in my Humvee, which I had an accident that burned them all up. All the time on my Humvee, so I bought air conditioners for people. I paid money for financing for people to finance people to tell me information. So it was more like being a beat cop. Now, when we got over, we take over from first reconnaissance, and we get a debrief of this is what we were doing, and this is our mission and how we were conducting it. But every mission changed. So we had no idea that Fallujah was going to happen we weren't informed at our level. That was at way higher Big Blue Arrow stuff than us. So we got over there, we started going on the AO. So what we did, we'd get our supplies, we'd go out in the AO, and we would look for bad guys. And we didn't stay, the units didn't stay in Camp Fallujah that long. We were always out. We go into a village, we go into an area, we basically kick people out of their house, say go next door, because their family always lives next door. And then we take that area, we set up our reconnaissance operations center, we conduct patrols, and we try to find the bad guys. That's what we were doing. But then Fallujah we started told, hey, we are going to assault Fallujah, because if you remember, the contractors got together, because Fallujah was contained. I guess I got to explain some stuff. Fallujah was no one comes in, no one goes out when we showed up. So 1st Marine Division was in the north in Ramadi, and then you have Al-Assad that was Al-Taqaddum was over to the west, and then you had Fallujah, which was to the south of Fallujah, and then Baghdad. So Fallujah was contained and like surrounded by good guys, and Fallujah, no one could drive through Fallujah. It was a bad guy scenario. That first assault, they started to go into Fallujah. They started taking casualties. They pulled back, and Fallujah come into Fallujah, come one, come all, fight the Americans. They had Chechens, they had foreign fighters, they had everybody. So then the contractors drove through Fallujah, and they killed the contractors and hung them from the bridge. And then the American public and everyone said, "What in the shit? They did what?" And so the assault was on. So we started flying pamphlets over that said, "Hey, get out of Fallujah. We're basically going to attack Fallujah." We told them, "Hey, we are going to attack you." So we let all the civilians leave. No one was in. No one was allowed to go out. And so the pre-Fallujah assault, like I said, there's 3 basic ways I remember Fallujah: is pre-Fallujah assault, the Fallujah battle, and then post-Fallujah. The pre-Fallujah assault with us was we went to the south to the Jolan district. I think it was 1st Meth was up to the north, and we were doing shaping operations. We were doing counter sniper ops, and we were doing tons of fire support missions and air support missions and airstrike missions. And what happened to me, it sucked, which is why I got Anglico guys on my next deployment, is they considered me a battalion level asset as the only JTAC in the battalion. So what they did is they took away my platoon, and they made me an executive officer of one of the reconnaissance companies and said, you are the JTAC, and you basically have 3 platoons, and you're running fire support missions and air missions for the 3 platoons. So I lost my organic platoon as a platoon commander, and whereas an Anglico team or as a normal fire support team, you have your comm guys, your scouts, your JTAC, if you have them, I was a one-man band. I had to do my own comm fields. I had to do everything myself. Like I said, everything was changed on the fly. So it was a good and a bad for me. I became a battalion level asset as the only JTAC. I did type 1 casts, a lot of type 2 casts, some type 3 casts with airframes. And when I say I dropped with everything, I dropped from F-15s, F-18, Harriers, Apaches, AC-130 gunships, Kiowa Warrior Army, Magnum PI helicopters is the best way to explain. I did everything. But what I did during this time is when we were going to go in, when we were doing the pre-assault, there was an artillery battery that was there, organic, providing fires. And I knew I was going to be inundated, and I could not do it all. I went to the artillery battery. I cannot remember who the battalion was. I think it was Lieutenant Tidwell that got attached to me. I went over and got 2 more FOs, forward observers. And I don't even think they got to bring their teams. So the battery was just doing fire support. So their FOs weren't doing anything. They had their FDO and their guns platoon commander and their battery commander doing stuff. So the FOs were just kind of extra officers. I got 2 forward observers, lieutenant forward observers, attached to the other 2 reconnaissance platoons for the Battle of Fallujah, because I was like, I am in a fire helmet storm. I cannot do all of this fire support for an entire battalion main effort. So I was like, I got to have some support. So I got 2 artillery lieutenants that came over to the different platoons, and they actually were doing fire support for the platoons. That was the Battle of Fallujah. So let me go back for the pre-Fallujah assault. We were doing a lot of ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance with aerial aircraft, and calling in a lot of type 2 casts. During the night, we would do infiltration ops, where we would sneak into the southern edge of Fallujah, because they had a whole reconnaissance battalion. I say a whole reconnaissance battalion, a very small reconnaissance battalion, as the southern blocking force for a Marine division in the north. So we were supposed to keep all the squirters from coming out of Fallujah while the meth assaulted from the north and cleared by streets.
Really?
So we were going in and doing sniper ops, fire support ops, and air ops. So my goal was to make us look very big and say, hey, we were a bigger unit than what we were. So we had an operation, I remember it's called Nefarious Penguin. We were going in and doing counters. That's what my opso called it. He just wanted to do something funny. So we were going in doing sniper ops. We would infiltrate into the enemy lines. We would be between the good guys and the bad guys, and it's kind of demoralizing to do sniper ops and fire and airstrikes when you think the enemy's north of you, but you're getting swacked from all sides. So our operation pre-Fallujah was to go in and make them feel like, I don't know where the fuck I'm going to get hit from. And then at night, we did some of the coolest stuff I look back I ever got to do was a lot of Type 2 casts with ISR. Everything was infrared. And I say that the point where I felt like I was God, and that's the best way to explain it, is this is pre-drones. No one has drones. No one's doing this stuff in 2004. Is I have a computer screen. I'm gathering my intelligence, and I see the bad guys. I see clear day. They have RPGs. They have AK-47s. A lot of them were trying to keep the civilians from leaving because they wanted to have civilian casualties. We got intelligence. So we'd see them trying to keep people at night that were trying to sneak out of Fallujah, families, and tell them to go around, turn back, go back to your house. And so we would see bad guys, and I would just literally be on a screen for all hours of night, just dropping massive amounts of air. I'm talking as AC-130, F-18s, F-15s, no helicopters at night, all fixed wing and AC-130 gunships. But I'm talking all night, from sundown to sun up. I would just me and the air officer I went through JTAC school with, or he went before me, but me and Mumbles, that's all we did at night. We sat in the rock, or we sat in a position and did nothing but Type 2 casts all night on a screen. And I'd see these guys. I could see them lighting up a cigarette. I could see them doing something, and I would be calling in an airstrike, and I'd be like, these guys have no idea what the hell is about to happen.
Yeah.
They were just pink mists and, a hot spot on my screen afterwards. But I mean, for the very first couple of months, we did so much air, I could not. That's why I felt inundated when we were going to do the assault. I'm like, I need some FO backup. I need someone else that knows fires, because all night was Type 2 ISR cast. And then during the day, I'd have to do it too. I'm like, I didn't get any sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I bet you made those guys days when you came over and asked them if they wanted to jump on and do some work with Recon rather than sitting at the battery position, which is still cool. They would have slung rounds over there, but what's that?
I said they made my day. I was so happy to have them. I had to convince the battalion that we needed them, though. I was like, hey, we really need to have these guys because I can't do it all. I was the only JTAC, which if I go back to later on my second tour in Recon, that's when I went over to Anglico and said, will you guys please come deploy with us? We need you, and talk the battalion into sending us 2 or 3 Anglico teams on my later tour to Iraq, that I was going to Iraq. And that's when I got Major Warrington and his teams attached to us, because I just saw that I as the only JTAC besides the air officer, who was a FAC, but he was a JTAC, that did that. I was just like, he would go out, but then the OPSO says, we need you back at the battalion. We can't have my air guy in the field doing ops with the teams when I need to know if we can do this or we can't do this. So he stayed at battalion, I stayed in the field, and that's the way we ran everything. But pre-Fallujah was all day, every day. And I know from my citation, I had 100+ fire support and air support missions. Every airframe that came to me went Winchester and bingo. I don't know how many passes they would go depending on what they had, what loadout they had, but they did every gun run until they were Winchester on guns. And then they stayed around doing show of force, or what were those low-level passes.
Yeah.
And then they would go away. And Mumbles, the air officer, said, hey, I can't keep people away from you. People come on the Jarn and they're like, hey, where's Flash at today? Oh, Flash over there. Hey, I want to, they were fighting because that's all I did all day long.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing is the pilots want to work too, so if they know an area's got something going on, they're up on the higher levels of the air coordination spectrums, like trying to get over to that area, to get passed onto the JTAC that's actually doing some work, because they don't want to just fly around and do ISR scans and stuff like that, like looking around for bad guys when there's someone out there that actively has them. So interesting. I didn't know So for maybe the people that don't know what with the whole thing of Fallujah, I'm going to go through like a quick breakdown. Like you said, the first Battle of Fallujah, some contractors were killed, hung from the bridge there, and that caused us to send in, a whole group of Marines, which actually did a really good job of like pushing into it. And then it became a political fight. They wanted the Marines to pull back, and they wanted to say that the Iraqi police and Iraqi army could by themselves take care of Fallujah and quell the unrest, which didn't work. It was basically gave the insurgents a few months to prepare to build fighting positions and stuff like that. And then, the order was to come back. The order for the second push was to go in, came down for everybody, and they started planning, like you said, basically encircled the city. And started dropping the leaflets and telling people to get out, giving them that opportunity to give out, which is why, people hear about the Battle of Fallujah and how crazy it was, and buildings are getting blown up because guys are getting killed as they're going in buildings and stuff like that. And I think some people may not realize the ROEs became looser because there was, over a week. What's that? Yeah, because they had told them, like, you have to leave the city or you're going to be looked at as an enemy. And I think from what I've been told, almost every one of them did leave. And like you said, there were probably some that got held back by the insurgents that were forced to stay and stuff like that. Yeah. And then the attack, like you said, multiple battalions. There was actually Army were involved there too. I think a lot of people forget about that. But they were pushing north to south. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, they were pushing north to south because it's the southern portion of the city is all lined by the river there. So there was nowhere for them to really go. I didn't know, this is the first I've heard that there were recon was in the southern portion there as a blocking position. I hadn't really heard of anybody talking about what happened in southern Fallujah except for when they talk about clearing down into southern Fallujah. So this is something interesting because I hadn't heard this before. You said you guys took over. You were operating out of the Reconnaissance Operations Center, the ROC. You took over someone's compound in the southern portion, like in that area, to run that, or were you guys mobile at the time?
So let me backtrack. You talk about the Army that was attached to the 1st Marine Division was 2nd Brigade Combat Team, and they had Bradleys and they were mechanized. And as a reconnaissance special forces unit, we're attachments. 2nd Reconnaissance got attached to 2nd BCT. So we actually worked with 2nd BCT as the blocking force. And so what happened was, and a matter of fact, they had a fire support officer that came and supported our fires officer in the battalion ROC, which was in Camp Fallujah. You got to understand, there's Camp Fallujah, which is outside of Fallujah, and then there's Fallujah. So we had a fires officer help support Mumbles, our arrow. So now they had an Army artillery officer as our fire support officer. He actually got on their right sleeve, they wear combat action patches. Yeah. His right arm combat action patch is the 2nd Recon Battalion subdued patch. It's badass.
Oh, that's cool.
Because you get to pick whatever battalion you went to combat with, and he wears. It's no recon gets to wear a recon patch. He gets to wear a recon patch on his right arm because he went to recon with us. So, like I said, the Euphrates River blocked the western side of Fallujah. 1st MEF was in the north. 2nd BCT that we were attached to took the eastern side of Fallujah down to the southern, and then 2nd Recon, we took the southern edge of Fallujah, and the southern edge of Fallujah was called the Jolan District. The best way to explain the Jolan District is it is the East LA of Fallujah. It is the ghetto. It is where all the lower socioeconomic class of the city were. So it was really ran down. It was the hood of Fallujah. So that's where we were at doing things. And basically all the forces contained it. And what we did as 2nd Recon is we would move into the Jolan District, sniper ops, air ops, disorienting, demoralizing ops. And my thing is we were a very small unit. So I put as much artillery, mortars, I called 120s, I called 155 on top. I was doing I can't even account how many SEAD missions I did. I did SEAD mission after SEAD mission because I wanted them to be what is in a combined arms dilemma. I wanted them all day long not to know how small we were in the South. So in the daytime we did air and sniper ops, and I pretty much was the glid. I got some pictures where all I was doing was glid work. which is our laser designator, dropping JDAMs. And then at night, it was all ISLIT. It was all laser pointer stuff with ISR. It was a little bit of GLID, but not as much as I remember. It was all like, hey, do you see me? Rope them in. That's the bad guys. Because we could infiltrate in a lot closer. And it was a lot of AC-130s, a little bit of fixed wing. But we didn't want them to squirt out our side. We wanted them to think, because the east, west, and northern units at Pre-Fallujah didn't start really attacking yet. We wanted them to think the assault may come from the south, and then 1st Marine Division just steamrolled in from the north. So we wanted them to think, oh, they can't come south. So that was our job as a blocking force.
Okay. And for those that don't know, the SEAD is the suppression of enemy air defense. And what we do there, when we run those missions, that means artillery is firing, and we fire along a timeline. So like every 30 seconds, rounds are hitting, and then there's a gap. Sometimes there doesn't have to be, but there's a gap in the artillery fire with enough time for an aircraft to come in and drop their ordnance and then fly off, and then the artillery picks back up on the back end. Sometimes, depends on how you run it, but that's kind of the general understanding. And what you said, that combines arm dilemma. Now these guys are getting hit with, HE, possibly white phosphorus from the artillery as well, and then now whatever kind of ordnance the aircraft's dropping on them. So they got rounds coming from all over the place. They got to figure out. It's hard for them to figure out what the hell's going on, because now everything around them is blowing up. I read something. I can't remember where I read it at, but it might have been in the Marine Gazette or whatever. What kind of nerd reads that shit?
Every Marine officer has to subscribe to it at the basic school for a year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually in MCT they put it out there for people they try to get, they bring those guys in and try to get you to sign up for it to keep it going. It's a professional magazine for the military. It's all right. But I think I was reading that it was talking about Fallujah is where the use of keyhole cast kind of came to be. That's where it was kind of like invented and like tested, in realistic, hey, we're doing this now. And that's where we kind of figured out keyhole cast. And then from there, so for those that aren't in the close air support community, keyhole cast is basically, if you look at a map, let's say you just draw like a cross, like north, south, east, west. Instead of, north, east, southwest, it is now Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and the center, the target is your echo point. You call that echo. And you'll say, point echo is location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want you to hold Bravo 10, which tells them, okay, I'm from that target location, I'm holding Bravo 10, which is east 10 nautical miles, and then, they'll route from there. So for those that don't understand what I'm talking about, that's keyhole cast, very simple explanation of it. But I wanted to talk to you about that. Did you see keyhole cast there? Is that where you used it? Had you heard of it before that? And yeah.
I don't even think I still know what keyhole cast is, because I think it might have been something, or I don't remember it. I've forgotten so much more. You were asked me to do a mission, fire support mission now, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I know,
everything
right?
I did was 9-line and 6-line for helo. And like I said, someone asked me, well, what is 9-line? What's E and 9-line stand for? I'm like, egress? Fuck, I don't remember.
Well, on the 9-line for keyhole cast, the 9-line, the keyhole part replaces lines 1 through 3. So you'll say 1 through 3 alpha 10 or alpha 8 or whatever it is, that you're holding at. So that's just kind of all that is giving a quicker routing. And again, I was reading about it. It was talking about because of the airspace congestion. Obviously Fallujah was a major offensive operation, but the city of Fallujah is really not that big. No. So having stacks and stacks of aircraft, you quickly start running out of places to put them. And this was an easy way for the controllers to, do their deconfliction so they don't have any aircraft running into each other. Or in your case where you're running artillery missions at the same time, you're not having that 1 in a million chance where an artillery round smacks into a helicopter or something as it's doing its gun run. So what kind of deconfliction issues did you find? Were there any major issues that was just kind of hard to work through that you just found yourself, like that, I don't know, that problem you just can't crack?
For me, like you said, I think it was like a kid in a candy store as a JTAC as far as what I had available to me, because I didn't have to do deconfliction because Mumbles, the air officer, did deconfliction at his level. He would just tell me, all hours, all days. I didn't know if I even slept more than 2 hours a day or night during the whole 3-week assault, 2.5-week assault of Fallujah, the main battle, which was the largest offensive campaign since Way City, Vietnam. It was insane. I just got to pick air. Like if I wanted a Kiowa, an Apache, a Cobra, an F-18, I literally just picked out of the air from the air officer, what do you have on station? He would say everything. And I would be like, okay, we're maneuvering. Like a deconfliction aspect you want to talk about is I had Kiowa warriors on station, and they were in their battle position off to the west of Fallujah, and I did their whole 6-line because I think I had just ran some Cobras. I didn't have fixed wing. The fixed wing had went Winchester. They went away, so I had some Cobras come in, and I had some Kiowas that showed up, and I put them in their battle position, their little BP box out there, and I said, hey, listen, after I read their 6-line, stay in your battle box. Do not push to the northwest out of your battle position because it's all hostiles. It's all hostile because we were basically surrounded. We were infiltrated that previous night in the Jolan district of Fallujah. And I remember the Kiowa warrior. She was a female pilot, and I was talking to her, and she came out and she pushed, and she was doing a rocket and gun run, and she flew. I could see her clear as day. She flew out of the battle position, and Fallujah lit up like a damn Christmas, like during the day, just lit her up. Everything in the world was shooting at her. And I was trying to talk to her, but I could hear the rounds through the radio just hitting everything. And for people that don't know what a Kiowa warrior is, imagine Magnum PI, maybe I'm dating myself, a little tiny open air cockpit helicopter, rockets and guns, no armament like an Apache. She and her co-pilot got lit the F up. They just shot up, and I was like, hey, are you okay? I didn't see any smoke or anything. I think they both took 9 rounds. They both got shot like 7 to 9 times.
Oh, shit. Jeez.
She flew back to Al-Taqatum and landed, which I don't think that was their position. I think they came from Al-Assad, which is more north.
Yeah, TQ's the closest, though. Yeah.
They just had to fly to TQ to land because they were shot up. But both of them took like 7 to 9 shots. And I just kept saying, why did you fly out of your battle position? I told you to stay in your battle position. And she literally flew over all the bad guys. And they just shot up and just, I mean, it was that.
Oh, man.
Up there. And I was
That's
like,
unfortunate.
You know, and I had another deconfliction issue. I didn't like F-15s, man. No offense to the F-15 community, but they would do whatever in the hell they wanted. Give me Marine and Navy and Army aircraft all day. But the F-15s would show up, and I would give them a final attack heading, a final attack cone, and I'd be looking, and they'd be coming perpendicular to me, and I'm like, I wouldn't say anything, and it'd flash. No, you're not clear. And I'm like, your final attack heading, final attack cone, give them this, and they would come back again. I'm like, you're running perpendicular to me. I'm going to drop a bomb on my head. I basically say, hey, contact whoever on the Jarn, and I would just switch the net because they wouldn't listen. And I talked to some other CCTs and stuff later saying, yeah, they just do whatever they want, sir. I'm like, no, they do what you want. You're the JTAC. If they don't do what you want, send them away because you're going to be like these guys we heard about in Afghanistan that dropped a JDAM on their head. I go, you're lazy and you're going to kill yourself. So F-15s, I had one good incident with an F-15. I got to drop a GBU-10. So
oh, wow.
Everything was GBU-12s. A GBU-10 is a 2,000-pound bomb. GBU-12s are the 500-pounders, JDAMs, pretty much everything we used. But a F-15 were the only ones showing up with GBU-10s, and I had one.
Dude, dropping a GBU-10 in a city is got to be insane.
It was probably 800 to 1,000, but I'd say we were less than 1,000 away, but we were in covered structures.
Man.
And Mumbles, the air officer, pulled up to us and said they have a GBU-10. He had to get a lot of clearance to drop that GBU-10. But I'm like, why am I going to do 4 passes with a GBU-12 500-pounder? I can drop a GBU-10 on this and accomplish everyking. Now it was
destroy whatever it is you're trying to destroy.
It was a shell shocker, but I told all the guys, go to the lowest position in the building, stay covered. Don't get out and try to look at this thing. Just stay covered because it's going to be like we're unleashing hell.
I bet you felt that, man.
Oh, you felt it into the core of your organs. You know, because they have the probability of incapacitation charts. I had those, and I was looking like,
yeah.
Fuck. And I had to fudge it a little bit with the battalion to tell them where we were at and where I was dropping, because I just got tired of dropping JDAMs because they would tell the infantry units, they told them at some point to stop leading by frags as they would clear buildings because they shot a family, killed a family. So they told the infantry battalions, we got intelligence during the battle, No more clearing by frags. No more throwing in 2 or 3 grenades, going in. And then several Marines and stuff got killed that way. And I'm like, everybody knew to get out. They didn't tell us that. We had a different mission with being a reconnaissance. But my thought process was, I'm not going to send a reconnaissance team to go into that building when I can just drop a JDAM, a GBU-5 on there, go in and count the body ports, divide by 4, and that's our casualties.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was leading by fires. I was a sniper with air assets is the way I looked at it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so what you're talking about for those that may not know is the clearing a room with a grenade or explosives or main gun round from a tank. That came into fruition because so many guys were getting killed because they were going into these houses like we talked about before. The insurgents had time to set this place up for battle. So what they would build is like almost like little machine gun bunkers inside of these compounds, and they would also bust holes in the houses so they could move between compounds without being seen. And guys would go in to clear a house, and just a dude sitting in the corner with a machine gun waiting on a team to come in. And, he knew he was going to die there, but he was going to take out some Marines with them. And I think that, from what I understand, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that was like the main issue, at the beginning stages of the Battle of Fallujah. And that's when they were like, fuck this, dude. No one goes into a room without grenades first or C4 or something like that, because too many guys were just, as soon as you open the door, boom, burst of machine gun fire. Why do that when you can just toss a grenade in first? So, yeah for those that may not have been tracking that.
My former battalion, 1-8, was the main effort in the center of Fallujah. And so my former infantry battalion, my first combat tour was in Fallujah, and I think you were in the center, and they were going through, and 1-8 was taking massive casualties during the Battle of Fallujah. Marku was one of our Marines. He was Albanian, and we did an operation in Albania. He got to be with the MU commander and be the translator for the Albanian president to the MU commander. We did operations on the MU. I remember Marku got killed. If you ever see that famous picture of the Marine grabbing the Marine in the street and pulling him, Gunnery Sergeant Shane, he was my company gunnery sergeant in 1st Battalion 8th Marines on my first deployment when those Marines went out into the street, and it was a full metal jacket scenario where they kept shooting a Marine that had fallen in the street. No one could go get him, and Gunny Shane, he was massive. He was just a big, worked out all the time guy. He's like, fuck this. Went out in the street, started dragging him back under fire. Got shot himself. I want to say he lost 2/3 of his intestines. Last time I saw him before he retired, he was really small because he had to get out because he got shot up so bad. But that was all 1st Battalion 8th Marines. Lieutenant.
Did the gentleman that he was dragging didn't survive, correct?
No, he didn't survive. Gunny Shane survived that. Another lieutenant, and it leaves my name. I cannot remember his name. He was in 1-8 with me. He was in Charlie Company, I believe. He was the first officer killed in Fallujah. He was on a top of a building, and he was going back in when they were taking fire, and he was bent over trying to stay low, and a round went right up his rib cage and pretty much bounced off the inside of his flak jacket. He fell down the stairs. And then after the Battle of Fallujah, one of my buddies who didn't make it out to recon that screened with us, he got out and went to force later. Lieutenant Noble, phenomenal officer. So we were trying to, and I'm jumping around the place, but he got shot in Fallujah. A 12.7 millimeter ricocheted off a Amtrak and hit him in the femur.
Oh God!
People that don't know what a 12.7 millimeter, it's a 50 cal. It's an enemy 50 cal. The only thing that saves him is the fact that it wasn't a direct shot. It ricocheted off the Amtrak and hit him in the leg, shattered his femur. He was slated to go to recon, but the battalion didn't let him leave because they were assaulting and going back to Iraq. He got out of he did that combat tour, got healed up, screened, went back, and went to second force.
He didn't lose his leg, huh?
He did not lose his leg.
Man,
I thought he died later because I was after the Battle of Fallujah. I'm jumping around. I was reading the KIA and WAI, the killed in action and the wounded in action after the Battle of Fallujah, and I was just looking at all these Marines in 1-8 that I served with that had died, because those are the guys I knew. And I saw Lieutenant Noble's name on the list, and I'm like, oh, fuck, Vince got killed. And I was really distraught about it. But then I realized I was in the WAI column, and I'm like, oh, Vince is wounded. I literally got on my sat phone, because I had a sat phone in recon. I got on my sat phone. I called Camp Lejeune, asked to go to the medical unit and talk to Vince. I'm like, Vince, he was all upset because he got taken away from the Marines. but he was alive. Later on, screened and went to recon. But the Battle of Fallujah it was come one, come all. They got to build up for like a year and a half to fight the Americans. And we did a counter sniper ops in the Jolan district, and we were hunting. The only way to hunt a sniper is with snipers.
Mm-hmm.
And we were hunting this sniper. He was a Chechen sniper. He had blonde hair, blue eyes. We saw him. We hunted him, me and the teams. We hunted him for days. He was taking shots at us. We were taking shots at him. But he was making an influence on 1st Marine Division, taking shots at people. And we got I don't think I'm giving anything away. I'm not talking about any classified stuff, but we got intel that he was, a sniper, and he looked to be Chechen, and he had all that Chechen gear on. Like I said, blonde hair, blue eyed. Who sees that in Iraq? We hunted this guy and his team for like 3 or 4 days, and my snipers were taking shots. We didn't get him. He didn't get us. He almost shot me on one occasion where I didn't see him, and 2 of the rounds went over the building and impacted right over my head. And I'm like, fuck, that was close. He almost took my fucking head off a couple of times. I got tired of that because I had to expose myself to look as a forward observer, a JTAC, to try to find stuff. Mm-hmm. So I said, we're not playing this cat and mouse game anymore. So we took teams. The teams took different times of the night. We're doing observation. We moved into cover of night, and we found an area where we think his team and his team head down. Well, that morning I was so tired. I got a couple hours of sleep from running CAS all night. And one of my teams came, Sergeant Heredia, one of my lead snipers goes, hey, sir, we got him. We know the position they're at. We see him. And he showed me this pile of fucking rubble. They got smart. They wouldn't go in buildings anymore because I started dropping fucking JDAMs on buildings and trying to just destroy the building and hopefully go to that building and find them. Well, they stopped doing that. So they started moving into rubbles of pile at night. So that night, the team caught them moving into like this whole rubble pile. And that morning, they watched him get up, take a piss. He was probably 500 meters away. We were hunkered down in the southern district. And I go, hey, no 50 cal snots, no DMR, the designated marksman rifle, no M40A4 sniper shots. I'm going to drop a fucking JDAM on him. And we're just going to stop this altogether because I'm tired of chasing him. Cat and mouse goes both ways with snipers. So he got up, and the Marines saw him take a piss and walk into this pile of rubble with his team. I called to the air. I got an F-18 on station with a JDAM, and I told them to stay far. I didn't even want him hearing F-18. I didn't want him to know anything was going on. Mm-hmm. Spun up my glid, got all the coordinates on it, and I was lazing. And for people that don't remember, if you're good at explaining this stuff, I'm lazing. If I got the glid and I do this, that bomb goes wherever, and it doesn't strike the target. So when I'm lazing and I'm designating, I don't get to see any of the aftermath. I don't get to see anything. I'm staying on target, and then I just see a big poof of explosion, and then I stay on target. Then I give the battle assessment to the aircraft, so I don't get to see what the Marines get to see. And so this Chechen went into this building. I had air on station. I called in a GBU-12 with the glid. I'm staying on target. He literally came out with like a cup of it looked like he was drinking something. And when he was coming out, I was designating right on him. And that JDAM hit the pile of rubble, and all the Marines just cheered and went all crazy. They said that JDAM didn't hit him; it hit the pile, and they saw him blow in the air, and they said a gigantic piece of concrete split him in half.
Oh shit!
And he flew like this into the explosion. The Marines that was the craziest. They were just going ballistic because we just took this whole team out.
Finally,
I didn't get to see a damn thing except a puff of smoke. Unfortunately, But it was finally we got I assume he was gone because we never took any sniper fire him anymore.
Yeah.
But the cat and mouse game of sniper ops is just, no, we're dropping a JDAM on this. We're not.
Quit messing around with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what we
crazy,
did for
man.
the battle. That's what we did. We just shaping operations, dropping bombs, sniper ops, moving in and out of positions. And it was a JTAC Christmas. I know the FOs got tons of the FOs that were with us. They weren't JTAC, so they had no air. I did incorporate them, SEAD missions with them with air on station, but I had hundreds of fire support missions. They had 100 fire support missions. My air officer said I had the most call for fires and airstrikes of anyone during the Battle of Fallujah, just hundreds and hundreds of CAS missions, because every aircraft, they can make 5 or 6 runs depending on what they're doing with their JDAMs or rockets, and then
because they come loaded to bear for something like that. They're not. It's not like training where they come out with like maybe one bomb and some gun, and they're coming with their full armament.
Yeah. Let me talk about a mission though that
Go ahead.
I'll talk about it now because it's the sexy stuff that people want to hear. They want to hear the fun stuff, but
give the people what they want.
Yeah. But I'll tell them myself now. At the time, I totally did not tell them myself, but I think there's a much time in between it. And as a JTAC, I was a little bit embarrassed as a fire support guy. So we're in the Jolan district. I have Cobras on station all the time with Hellfires. So I'm using the Glid with Hellfires all day. I prefer to laze with the Hellfires because even though I do a tuck on and I give them a 6-line and I tell them the second story, third window from the northwest, which building to hit, they're not always seeing what I see. And they would I would do a tuck on, they would do a back brief, and then the fucking thing would go in the wrong window. And I'm like, fuck, I didn't want it there. I wanted it here. So they could designate and laze for themselves. So I just started lazing everything for myself. So I had a Hellfire station with some Cobras, and we were in a covered position in a building. And what I did is we had some hooligan tools and sledgehammer. So you don't laze through a window because you get shot. So I just started knocking out holes in walls big enough for the Glid to fit in and just a little bit for me to see over it. And so I would laze from a building. I would take whatever material I could over it to not have any light shine through during the day. And I would laze through these mouse holes in the buildings we would move into at night. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't see through this mouse hole very much, but I mean, we were probably within 50, 75 meters of guys, and we were just dropping Hellfires on them. And the funny thing is, we learned later that they got told that our tanks were made of cardboard. So I would see a guy run out with an AK-47, an insurgent, take a knee, and just unload a magazine, AK-47 at a tank. Tank's like this, and he's just like, oh, there's a mosquito over here. Main gun round from 50 yards away. Poof, shoot that insurgent with one round and then go back to the fight. And we captured some guys later, and I go, why are you guys, I go, ask them why they're attacking the tanks. Why are they running out just willy-nilly attacking the tanks? And they got told our tanks were made of board or cardboard, or they weren't armored like we said they were. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense if you think it's made of cardboard. So we're in this position, and these guys are running out, and they're shooting and they're firing, and I'm lazing for this Hellfire, and this Hellfire blows up literally in midair right in front of us. I'm talking 25 to 50 meters away, probably closer. Just blows up right in front of us. All the Marines are in a cover position. The Marines are like pissed at me. What the fuck did you do wrong? Kind of a thing. They didn't say it, but I could see it in their eyes. Like,
yeah,
did you almost Hellfire our ass? And the Cobra pilot thought he hit our position. The Hellfire hit so close. He's like, flash, are you there? And I'm like, I tell him, I don't even think I was being polite. I'm like, what the fuck? On the hooks, which is not what you say. But I just had a Hellfire explode in my face. And he goes, what happened? And he goes, I don't know. You tell me what happened. We didn't really have time to discuss it then. You know, they made another run, and we got the Hellfire, and we accomplished the mission. And then we moved into the positions later as we cleared the streets. And for our fire support or JTAC guys, what happened was I was lazing through this mouse hole, not realizing I was lazing through a triad of 3 telephone wires. So I'm lazing through the wires at the position. I was so close, and the wires were so here that they were spread up, but I didn't see them. And the Glid was this is my interpretation, because I saw the lines were down from the explosion on both sides of the street afterwards. And I'm like, how the fuck I was trying to, as we moved into position, took the position and held it for that night. But during the day when we moved, I kept looking like, why the hell did this Hellfire explode in our face? And what I assessed, no one ever told me, but I lazed through telephone wires, which they tell you not to do. I just didn't see it because the mouse hole I created couldn't see the wires, and that refracted that laser, and it gave their bigger signature, and that Hellfire went straight to those telephone wires and blew up on our face.
That's sketchy, man. Yeah, for the non-JTAX, non-JFO people, it's hard to explain the laser designator. It's just, I think if you've seen the first or second Transformer, they use lasers to like mark targets. Think of it like that, I guess, but it's not actually visible. The laser is not visible. And it's, like you said, it's very easy to not see something, because especially if you're looking through the optics, those wires are going to almost disappear because you're looking past them, so you're not going to see them anyway. So you have to be very cognizant of where your laser energy is going, because if it hits something like that, a blade of grass, a limb, it's providing laser energy. And if the seeker head of the munition, either a GBU or a Hellfire or something like that, it sees that laser energy, it goes towards that. Ground-based lasing Hellfires is already a sketchy thing because it's not only do you have to do your 10 degrees offset, 30-degree laser cone, there's a whole thing with that by itself because it can easily turn to the laser designator and see, because if you're too far outside of the laser heading, it can turn towards the laser designator and land on the operator, like you were, kind of like what you're explaining. But obviously that wasn't the case in your situation because you were indoors. You were shooting from indoors to outdoors. But
I'll send you some pictures later. I had a real rudimentary digital camera at the time. I think it's like 4 megapixels. But I took some cool pictures through the glid with the reticle pattern while we were designating in Fallujah. And then I have a picture of a couple of the Marines that took positions when I have the glid in my position set up. And I'll shoot you those pictures so they can see the mouse hole and everything that we were talking about. At the time, they didn't have any videos. This was 2004, 2005. But I do have a couple of pictures I'll show you so people can see with the reticle pattern and how limited I was with looking through that, what I was looking at with that position.
Yeah, most of the time nowadays, like in Afghanistan and stuff like that, there's not a lot of ground-based lasing going on there. And if you do, a lot of times it's just for correlation, you'll do a laser spot handoff is what it's called. And I don't know if you guys use that same terminology when you were going through TSP school, but where I laze the target.
Where they pick up my laser, know where it's at, and then they laser designate themselves.
Yeah, their seeker pod knows that laser energy code because it's all encoded. So it knows that laser energy code and it snaps to it. And now the aircraft can see the target without ever actually having to look for it. Like you're showing them where it's at, and then you confirm. Obviously, you have to confirm
that the closeness of how we were using the laser designators was a good and bad, because like I said, sometimes their Hellfires or their JDAMs would they're a moving craft and they're lasing, and it stayed on pretty good, but it's still an area fire weapon, so to speak, kind of, and it was precision, but it would still be off, which is why I started designating for myself more, because I just I would really want this window hit from where we were taking fire, and it would hit in the floor above or floor below or around it, and then we're still taking fire from that freaking spot. Then I'm like, fuck, I gotta have them come back around. Those guys are displacing, they're moving, and now we're gonna hit that window, but they're maybe not there. So I started designating for myself just because I would talk them on, but I could just laze and do it. I knew exactly what I was talking. It became faster. Yeah. Instead of a talk on, a talk back, a debrief, I'm like, give them the laser code. I could just designate, and
for sure,
I could just rapidly employ the lasers. I didn't know that they had done less of that.
Yeah, I think so. The issue that you're talking about, where they're not hitting the window that you're specifically talking about, could come from where you're holding them. Like maybe if you brought them in closer, because beam divergence, this is getting into the nerds, part of JTACRI, but the beam divergence, for the people that don't know what I'm talking about, if you hold like one of those little pin lasers on your hand, it's a little dot, but if I shine it on the wall across the room, it's a bigger dot. Same thing happens with these lasers coming from the laser designators. So the farther away you are, the bigger the dot is. So the weapon will see the dot and it'll hit that general area, like you said, it'll hit around the window, but it may not actually go in it. Yeah, I guess a tactic for that, and that's something the pilot should be aware of as well, and be like, hey, I need to come in a little bit tighter to get that accurate of a target. But yeah, man, that's all these weird little things you got to think about.
Everything at night wasn't glid though. Everything at night was the ISLID. ISLID was everything at night. So no JDAMs, or they would self-laze themselves. I would direct them on with the ISLID, and they would back brief and talk me on, then they would designate, and they would just, everything at night was ISLID. It wasn't glid stuff then. I don't remember why or what it was, but everything was the ISLID, which was that lightsaber. It
looks like a lightsaber, but it has a infrared laser on it. Extremely powerful.
Extremely powerful. And that a lot of tough stuff at night was the AC-130. Those guys don't even need us. As long as they know where you're at and you tell them what's going on, they just wipe it all out. So everything at night was ISLID. Everything today was glid work.
I've got to do some work with AC-130s out down at Hurlburt Field and stuff like that, and they're and training, and it is crazy how fast you can get those guys on target with no comms, because they practice no comm close air support all the time, which is just roping the aircraft with your ISLID and then pointing at the target, and then they do, I'm not going to go into specific details, but they do like a way to confirm it. They'll flash or whatever, and then confirm they're on target, and then you do your thing to confirm that they are on target, and they just start attacking right there. So it's like within 30 seconds, you can rope them, be on target, they confirm, you confirm, and just boom, 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 and it's like just get annihilated. It's an impressive.
Guys are so good. They don't need the JTAC on the ground. They just need to know where you're at, and they were so surgical and so accurate. And everyone knew in Fallujah, all the bad guys knew. We started taking them out so much with the AC-130s that the AC-130s would go Winchester. They wouldn't be bingo, but they would go Winchester at night, and they would still just fly around so they could be heard, and no bad guys would move. They would stay completely at night. If they heard a C-130 up there in the sky, we got no movement. They knew if they heard that airframe on station, and we got intel that they say, if you hear this, do not move, you will die. So they would go Winchester, and hey, Flash, we're going to stay. They would stay around for an hour and a half, just flying around, and we could just move under cover of darkness at night because no one would attack us at night. And it got so much to where the bad guys heard them and wouldn't move around. We would move into position, and we would come up on guys, and we would find them asleep with their rifles in their black pajamas, and we would have them zip tied and not dead and cuffed up before they even know what happened. We're lucky we were fighting a lazier enemy, I say all the time, because we would come up on them asleep and zip tie them up before they even knew what was going on.
Half of them were probably coming down from the drugs and stuff that they had them on while they were there. That's another huge thing, that the fighters in Fallujah were known to be all amped up on amphetamines and stuff like that. And painkillers too, to, continue fighting even after they were shot. So you're probably seeing a lot of guys that were crashed out from that as well. Yeah, dude, AC-130s are great. The gunship is awesome. What a cool platform. It was great going out and training with them, doing some work with them, and then like sitting in the little squadron bar and doing the debrief. And like, I got a koozie and stuff over there from them that they gave me from last time I was down there. I've been trying to get one of the guys on Instagram who's got a pretty big page to come on and talk about his time with the AC-130s. And, the cool thing about that platform is it's slowly adapting for modern fights. They're always adding something else to it. So people, think about, they got the 30 millimeter gun, the 40 millimeter gun, and then the 105. And then that's kind of changed. Those variants have changed a little bit. And now they're coming out with these with small diameter bombs on them, and they're doing all these different missions and stuff like that, or adding to their capabilities just because it's such a capable platform. I'd love to have someone come on, especially if I'd really like to dig up a guy from the Vietnam era that did it when it was Gatling guns out of the side and talk about some of their stuff. But man, AC-130s are cool. Doing CAS is great. Nowadays, like I was saying, in Afghanistan, there wasn't a lot of ground-based lasing and stuff because you were in like an actual battle. This was an offensive, action, like fighting constantly all day, every day. Whereas in Afghanistan, unless we were going into a new area, think 3-5, going into Sangin and trying to fight through there. But even that was a lot of IEDs and stuff. There's not a lot of like forcing your way through a city. They took Marja. That was one where they did a lot of stuff like that, like working their way through the city. So a lot of the close air support and stuff is actually all run from the COC, from like you were saying, sitting in front of the video screens, even call for fire. When I was the 3-6 fires chief, none of my scouts got to do a call for fire while they were out on patrols and doing shit like that. I did all of it from the COC because I had the best, situational awareness, or they weren't in the area or whatever. So we were doing all the HIMARS and everything. And it's a weird, it's kind of a, it's weird because it takes you away from what's actually occurring. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're watching it on TV. I'm watching it on a 70-inch TV. This, like you said, the black and white IR, tracking a guy and then taking him out and then like, hey, let's go get lunch. Like
it doesn't
it's just
seem real. If you've ever seen I think it's Ghost Recon or Call of Duty, one of them. There is a part of that game I played where it shows an AC-130 with infrared. I'm like, that is exactly what it looks like. They have the AC-130 sound in there, like the guys talking at cons. I'm like, this is so accurate of what it feels like doing that type of CAS.
Yeah.
That you speak to the actual combat operations to what I did during that time. That was the 3-week battle of Fallujah, and then we could have accomplished the same by dropping 5 Moabs or daisy cutters and then going in as we did by assaulting, because we leveled the city once we went in. I'm like, we really should have just dropped a bunch of Moabs and mothers of all bombs or daisy cutters and then come in.
Yeah.
But
well, I think go ahead.
I was gonna say afterwards it swapped from the main assault of Fallujah. Here we just go through this large offensive campaign. It felt, the best way to tell people, Fallujah felt like the 4th of July with the possibility of being killed, because Artie's shooting a loom at night sometimes. Mm-hmm. It's firefights, it's rockets, it's bombs dropping. There is no sleep. It literally was just the 4th of July all day, all night for 3 weeks in Fallujah, in all directions. So the deconfliction had to have been insane. But after that, the post-Fallujah, we got pulled out of Fallujah, and the meth pretty much ran Fallujah. We owned it. They were sweeping up and establishing that. We went into a more of what you're talking about, how it was in Afghanistan, is we went into an IED, weapons cache, counter rockets, and counter border fight. And so we went into a lot of the southern, our battle, our area of operation was southern area of Fallujah. So we had a lot of what you talked about. We went into a town that was made by the North Koreans called Almeria. And this place was a whole town, like a modern city that had been built by the North Koreans. But we went out there and we would basically do the cop work. We wanted to find who were financing that, because now everyone knew if they came out and fought the Americans, they just got annihilated. So they implanted IEDs, they did sniper, and then they tried to put us in a mortar machine gun attack when we were driving someplace. So everything became that counter IED weapons cache fight. And go ahead.
I was gonna say, that's the hard part of the fighting, man. Like doing that, the counter IED, counter insurgency work is like, I mean, as a Marine, you know, you expect to go into combat and be like fighting, you know, like going through and clearing areas and taking areas, and, you know, there's the enemy base, let's attack the enemy base. And it's not that. It's not. It's like watching people and either waiting to be attacked or waiting for the enemy to fuck up and give up their, like, oh, well, shit, he's an enemy. You know, like, oh, did you see him? He just had an AK that showed underneath his robe, you know, or something like that. It's a weird fight. Before we move on from talking about Fallujah, I just wanted to mention, I've had a couple other Fallujah vets come on and talk. Michael Hanthorne came on episode 4 and talked about his time there working as mortuary affairs and having to clean up like the dead insurgents, you know, as the fighting was going on. They were trailing the infantry units that were clearing houses. They were like 1 to 2 houses behind them, cleaning up the dead insurgents and shit like that. So he has a really interesting perspective about it. Tony Leal came on episode 69 and he talks about the first battle at Fallujah. So he was there when they first went into that. So that's an interesting one. You know, the second battle is what everyone talks about, but you know, a lot of people forget about that first battle of Fallujah and then the politics that went behind the why they pulled them out and then eventually went back in. So I just wanted to put that out there. So once it was over, man, the thing is even in 2009 when I went as a mechanic, Fallujah was still a piece of shit city. Guys were still getting attacked in there. Yep. I remember there was an advisor team that we would do work on their Humvees every once in a while. And one time they came in and it had a fucking, like, some kid, I think it was a kid, threw an RKG-3 on it, which is it looks like a potato masher grenade. Yeah. And it has a little parachute that pops out the end. It's a shape charge. Yeah. And some kid had thrown a RKG, I think it's RKG-3, at it, and it hit the door, blew through the door, the shape charge through the door, and I think there was a corpsman sitting in the passenger seat, and I want to say the round went through his calf and like blew his calf off or something like that. And after that happened, and then I guess the police, the army or Iraqi police that they were working with were basically like, hey, you need to get out of the city. Like, you shouldn't even be here anyway. So it became like a what the fuck, you know, kind of moment. Yeah. And I want to say after that in 2009, they told them no other units are allowed to go into the city of Fallujah unless I think there had to be some kind of special directive or something like that, because it was just still a dangerous place, you know. Yeah. So after you guys finished up Fallujah, that was secured or whatever you want to call it. What were like the a week or two after that? Did you kind of like did you get to rest at all? One, and did you kind of come to, a realization of what you had just done, that you and the other Marines and the Army guys had just like undertaken, during that battle?
There was no rest.
No rest for the weary, bro.
No, we got done with Fallujah, and 2nd Brigade combat team kind of stayed there, and we kind of detached from them. So the MEF and the BCT stayed there to do more conventional operations. So what we did as a reconnaissance unit is we went out and lived in our AO, our area of operation. We lived amongst the local populace, and we started to try to find the bad guys. Because like you said, now the enemy wasn't concentrated. They were squirted out everywhere. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't know this, but TQ to the southwest of TQ and Fallujah was a gigantic Iraqi army supply point. And it had been ransacked, and no one was covering it. And EOD was there all the time, just blowing up. They were never. It was an endless battle. They were never going to blow up all the ammunition there. But the Iraqis, when we invaded and took over, all the villagers, bad guys, good guys, they just took ammo and they just took it all over the place. So we were finding IED caches and weapons caches and trying to explode them. We go through our own demolition school to get caches and blow. So we blew up. I carried 60 pounds of C4 in my vehicle. Every vehicle had 40 pounds of C4 to blow up caches. So we went out. We got a couple engineers attached to us sometimes, or sometimes we just got the mining equipment ourselves, and we were going and doing cop work. Who the bad guys? Where are the weapons caches? Some were bad guys. Some were just local villagers who got weapons to protect themselves from other people. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. We did some sniper ops, and we did some cool stuff. We did a really cool boat op with Zodiacs and everything, because First Recon did a jump op in Iraq before we got there. So if you
really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they did. So if anyone doesn't know this, when you do a jump op in combat, a combat jump automatically gives you your gold wings. So if you do a combat jump, you don't do the jump out of this many platforms with this requirement to get your gold wings. One combat jump, your gold wing. So the entire battalion did a jump op. Matter of fact, in Amaria, where we were at, it seemed like we were always in Amaria doing something. And so the whole battalion got gold wing, the guys that weren't, and then you get a combat jump listed on your stuff. But because First Recon did a combat jump, our battalion commander, he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to follow in suit. And we all wanted to do, when are we going to get to jump in combat? We're never going to do this again. Let's do, of course it would have been at night, and it would have been legit, not a slick jump, but he was just dead set on not following their trail. So we did a boat op. We did boat ops, amphibious ops in the Euphrates with dive gear and all that kind of stuff. We did a mission at night, found intel, found out this bad guys were on this island in the Euphrates, got our boats, like something you'd see on a commercial, came in and all cami painted up, got on the boats. With some of the Marines went into scuba gear, found the bad guys, killed them, blew up, and then went away on our boats at night under the cover of darkness. As we're going away, the weapons cache blows up, and I'm like, man, this was a fucking commercial right here.
I was gonna say, that's like some movie shit right there, man. That sounds awesome. That's like stuff you hear about from Vietnam, where like the SEALs den, the frogmen then like sneaking in and taking some dudes out, or the LERPs, going in. The
logistics of having to get boats on trailers towed behind Humvees to a place in the Euphrates where we could go at night, offload, recover the boats. I mean, it was a legit boat raid mission and that's what, it doesn't sound sexy to the guys that jump maybe, but that was a legit reconnaissance, mission.
Are there any books about that? Is there anything that talks about any of these boat raids?
That might be the first one that anyone talked about it, because I don't know. I've never
You might need to write a book, man.
I could write a whole thing on that night, on that mission. It was really cool, and everything went like a damn... I felt like G.I. Joe Snake Eyes doing a boat out mission in the middle of the night, because I remember everything was... like we came up on the objective, we killed the guys that were in the cache site, because there was an island in the middle of the Euphrates, which was a big island. They had a whole weapons cache we got intel for. We rigged all the demo up. We rigged the demo up with timers, so as we got back on the boats, and we're actually paddling, so it's quiet. We're like paddling quietly so we don't make any noise, and as soon as the explosion goes off by our timers, boom, engines light up, and we just take off on the Euphrates and get recovered. So it was a whole...
That's wild.
That was our battalion commander. He's like, we're going to do a recon mission. We're going to do a boat mission. Since they did jumps, we're doing amphibious.
How I mean, knowing that there were enemy on the island, and you're coming up on Zodiacs, little rubber boats coming up, paddling up to them, and being super quiet, Like, how did you feel at that moment? Like, you got to explain the emotions, like, of going through that, or like, how scared were you? You know, like snooping and pooping through the brush or whatever it was you had to get to these guys.
I'd say that mission, it's always after you reflect and you look back how awesome it was in the prep up to the mission, because not every mission went that good. We had some missions go to shit. We did Trojan horse ops I could talk about later, but that mission, the workup, it's always afterwards you reflect. And that's what I say when I reflect and I look back. We planned a boat ops. I was a former boat guy in the infantry battalion. So I was the, navigator, planner for all of that. To go out and do a legit boat op and do it, like, that is quintessential cliche recon commercial that you see. And we got
for sure.
And we got to do it. So, I mean, looking back now, but at the time, we're so focused on mission. I don't think we got to reflect of, that was so badass, that was cool.
That was just one of many cool things that you were doing at the time. Just doing your job.
Just literally doing our job. It's like looking back and talking about it. And I didn't get into all the details. I just kind of broad brush stroke it to show the main stuff that we got to do was really cool. I talk about, we did Trojan horse ops. Man, I'm hoping when I'm not talking too much about stuff. I don't think anything is classified.
No, probably not. But I mean, you're not giving any specific details, right. TTPs or anything.
We would dress up as Iraqis in full garb, beard. I mean, I look like a damn terrorist right now with this beard probably. But we would dress up, especially our Hispanic or Italian Marines. They would grow out the
darker complexion.
Oh yeah, we would take our we on Second Recon Battalion. You would come over to it. It looked like a used car lot because we had Mercedes and Iraqi Mercedes, Iraqi taxi cabs on there. We would commandeer all these vehicles because we would do Trojan horse ops where Marines would dress up, and if a white Marine like me was there, I would dress up as a female, so you couldn't see anything, gloves, all of it, and go into areas and we weren't attacking at the time. We were trying to do reconnaissance and surveillance for an assault of attack of a HVI or HVT, a high value individual or high value target later, and do Trojan horse ops all day, walk around the AO. They wouldn't know what was going on or who it was because we were in Iraqi vehicles. We were dressed like Iraqis. The Marines looked like Iraqis. We would have an interpreter sometimes with those. So we did Trojan horse ops that way. We did one night. It was just went to shit. The Marines, we got told we always wanted to capture, not kill the guys because we could get more intelligence that way.
Yeah, you get the next guy up the chain.
Yeah, so we did a Trojan horse ops. We were hoping to get into a compound where we got legit intelligence of Abu Sayyaf, whatever, a financier of one of the head guys, and that was a made-up name. I don't remember the name. Was a financier that we're going to capture him, and the Marines pulled up to the compound outside of southern area of Fallujah, and everything was going good. I was on the back. I had aircraft way up high. I was doing ISR with F-18s so high you couldn't see them, but they could see what was going on. They had their FLIR pods. But as soon as they pulled up to the compound, one of the guys came up to the car and said something in Iraq, and one of the Marines in the back said, Marhaba. He said, like, hi. But it probably sounded horrible, like a retarded 12-year-old just said it.
Buongiorno.
And I'm listening, exactly. I'm listening on the radio to this, and I'm like, oh, this ain't good because we're running into a guard. And he just lifted up his AK and just sprayed a taxi cab, not an armored vehicle, not nothing. Just sprayed this taxi cab as they took off, and I can hear on the radio just screaming and yelling. And the Marines were supposed to have their long guns to their side, but they were supposed to have pistols at their ready on their belly so they could just come up and take a shot if they had to. But for some reason, none of them did that to take the shot, and they had silencers on their weapons and everything like that. A silencer is not as quiet as people think. But they just slammed the gas and took the fuck off because they were getting shot up, and everyone started lighting them up.
Holy shit.
So then everything was done. We made sure they were good. I just started dropping JDAMs. I just said, well, this is compromised. We're not going to capture. They started squirting. So I just started running air like, okay, we're just going to gather sensitive site exploitation afterwards because this is, we're compromised. There was no sneaky stuff in Iraq ever. You got passive compromised every day by a dog, a kid, something. You couldn't sneak up on any damn thing because you just couldn't do it. So that went to hell in a handbasket. The funny thing about that story is later on the Marines, I saw them at the BAS, and everyone had got blown up by IEDs at this point. It was just a common occurrence. So the Marine that were in the back, I can't remember who he was, but I was seeing him in sickbay. He was getting bullets fragments pulled out of his back, because they had their plates on, but luckily the rounds went straight through almost the center console area. You could see where the rounds hit on the back of the vehicle, but they split off, and some of the rounds actually hit the Marines that were in the back seat in the back. And I just remember I can't remember his name, Corporal, it might have been Dempsey. Corporal Dempsey was like, fuck yeah, I don't got some weak-ass Purple Heart with an IED. I actually got shot. It was like a Christmas. He was elated. He told the battalion surgeon, it's a bullet, right? It's not a frag like all the other IEDs. He was so happy that they took a AK-47 by 7.62 by 39 out of his back and not an IED fragment. He's like,
how stupid are we?
He was so happy that a bullet hit him and not a frag. He's like, it's not an IED frag, right, Doc? It's a bullet. He's like, no, you get to keep it, think. And he kept his sappy plate with the other. He had 3 or 4 rounds in the plate that hit him in the plate.
Yeah, that's cool.
They all survived, but he got shot with
my CO over at First Anglico, and he was my XO at 210, Lieutenant Colonel Sims, probably a colonel by now. He actually in his office had his sappy plate on the shelf behind him. He was an Iraqi army advisor during the push into Fallujah in 2004, and had his I think it was his trigger finger shot off on one hand, on maybe his left hand. I can't remember. It's either his trigger finger or middle finger, and like the tip of it, like he lost like from one of the knuckles up, and so it was like when you go to see the CO in his office, he's sitting there talking to you, and his finger's been shut off. When he's talking, you can tell. And then behind him is a sappy plate with the shit coming out of it. Yep. So you're like, okay, this dude's legit. Like, he went there and he did that. So that's cool, man.
Got shot at different points on their sappy plate, and you'd go into the battalion or the platoon company offices back in, and they have their sappy plates with just the rounds all in them with their name on them, and they would take them home later with like 2 or 3 rounds. Like there'd be Marines that were in firefights, and they thought a team leader or a team member were pushing them to get positions, and then later on they're like, why were you fucking pushing me? I was like shooting, and like I didn't touch you. And they had gotten shot in the back in their sappy plate with a 7.62, and they looked later like they thought they got pushed like to take cover, and they like, oh no, you got shot in the sappy plate. So there were plates lined up on the wall with people that took the plates home and stuff later. But that was our mission, doing that kind of stuff. And I wanted to talk about some not too sexy, but some cool fire support stuff that we started doing post-Fallujah. And I'm pretty sure I'm the one that started this trend, and I know other units started doing it later. And it's just because I was a board fire support guy. That's what came about. So we started doing. We would go into areas, take over the houses, take over the positions, find the bad guys, find the weapons caches, try to capture or kill them, and gather intelligence. And real quick, we'd always move under night, under infrared headlights and nods at super fast speeds, so because that was our security. And we went to this position, a southern position. I don't remember where it was at, and I developed this good bond with a local imam. He would tell us who all the bad guys were everywhere. He'd let us. He had some of the biggest houses there, so it could take a recon company or platoon. So we'd always take over similar positions in that area. And we got pulled out to go somewhere else, and he's like, "Please don't leave. If you leave, they're just going to kill all of us." And I'm like, "No, we'll be back. I tried to get the battalion not to have us pull out. We were coming back in, and there's like this kind of like a traffic circle in the main town, and we would always come in. It's like Vietnam era stuff. We come in at night. During that day, we hit the market. We load up our vehicles with everything the souk had for vegetables and food and soda and candy, and take it back for our position because we got tired of eating MREs. So we'd take $20,000 to the souk and just buy all their shit and take it back to our position. And then we had Marine cooks that had pots and pans that would cook up, mix it with the MREs, and we lived out there with the population. No one wanted to be back in Camp Fallujah. That was sucky. We wanted to be in the area, so we would substitute our MREs with the local food. And we bought a lamb one time, and I don't know if I talked about it last time. I think I told you it got put in my vehicle. Did I tell you that?
I don't think so.
We
might have. I don't remember. I'm sorry.
We bought a lamb at a market, and it got put in my vehicle. Then we got in a firefight that kind of lasted 3 days, and it was raining and pissing on us. So the damn lamb stayed in my vehicle for 3 days. They named him Mike. My gunner named him Mike, my machine gunner. And then they decided to eat him like 3 days later. And I'm like, no, we named him. And like, they brought me a bowl of Mike. I'm like, I'm not going to have any Mike stew. You guys eat that shit. Because I felt bad.
That's funny.
This lamb went through 3 firefights or 3 days of firefighting with him.
But he's one of us now, guys.
That's what I felt. He was like a
mascot.
But we were going. We'd always go at night. We left this village. We should have never left it. We went back in, and my lead nav vehicle was like, "Hey, sir, you got to come up." I'm like, "No, push into the position. We got to take the buildings and secure it before daybreak because you don't move it during the day. You just get shot the fuck up, and you get ambushed. You get mortared. You're gonna get mortared anyways, but at least you're in the cover in the buildings." So I'm like, "No. We got to go now." And they're like, "No, you got to come see this." And I go up, and the sheikh is a tribal leader, the imam that we had been helping out that we got pulled out of, they had put him in the circle, and they had cut off his head, and they had put it in his lap, and they had one of those Iraqi like curved knives, and they had stuck a letter or label to his chest. And my interpreter, I'm like, what the fuck? That was the imam we were helping. And it said, "This is what happens to the infidels who help Americans."
That's crazy, man.
And I was like, I told the battalion, I told everybody, if we leave these people, they're dead. We've been here too long. We've killed a lot of bad guys. We've just developed a lot of intelligence. If we leave, these people are dead. And we've assured them that we are going to stay and help them. And you know, missions come down from higher, bigger than you. So it's like, that kind of stuff got old on us, helping people out, then leaving, and we had to go fight this fight or go to this mission, and then we just got attacked the whole next day in that village because they're like, "You said you're going to help us once, but you left us." So we totally took everyone that was for us and made them against us because, like, no, if we help you, we get killed. So.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that comes down from like higher commands not really understanding fully what's going on the ground and the repercussions of doing something like that, of, you know, kind of basically ditching the people that have been providing you accurate and solid intelligence, and then kind of throwing them to the wayside to fend for themselves, you know. Yeah.
I mean,
horrible, man.
That war, I know that war on a lot of the platoon commanders, because platoon commanders would have their own area of operations. They would develop their own CIs, their own intelligence gathering, and they would, you know, some of the team leaders, like I had a team leader, I went to a position, and Iraqis are big on leadership. If I'm the captain, they want to talk to me. They don't want to talk to my But my Marines would develop a rapport, and I'm like, "No, he's the captain." And I would just sit there and listen because they had developed that intelligence rapport with them. So a lot of the Marines, and that weighed on a lot of them. Like, if we leave now, we're going to get everyone we told we're going to help are going to die. And I remember Sergeant Cucker. He was one of my team leaders. He was on Generation Kill in the show Generation Kill. He's actually got a bit part in Generation Kill from that show, and he's also the military advisor for Generation Kill.
Oh, cool.
And Sergeant Langto, which I'll talk about later, was also one of my team leaders. He was also involved in that Generation Kill because they were 1st Marine Reconnaissance. Then they stayed over as augments to augment 2nd Recon. We got there, and they got into my unit, and they were 2 of my team leaders. Sergeant Langto got out of the Marine Corps, went to college, heard that 1st Recon was going back, made his way back into Iraq with a MSSG unit, found Recon, found his 1st sergeant, and got attached back to Recon.
Oh, really? That's
crazy
cool.
Vietnam, and then finally stayed with 1st Recon, and then came over to us a 2nd Recon. It's all in that Generation Kill, but those guys, I know it weighed big on them, that whole Generation Kill stuff, that they were going to get taken care of with the battalion, and I tried to make sure that they didn't get treated like second-rate citizens from that whole Generation Kill era with us.
Yeah.
But we were doing at that place where we went into, and we got attacked the next day. Just something turned to my head as a fire support guy. We got mortared and rocketed all the time. Camp Fallujah got rocketed and mortared all the time. And the elections started happening, and they were having Abu Ghraib. They wanted to change. They want to have the elections for the new government in Iraq, and they wanted to change all the bad stuff that Abu Ghraib showed. So they had the elections at Abu Ghraib, but Abu Ghraib got rocketed all day long, every day, all day. So they sent us as reconnaissance platoon to go out and do counter IED and rocket and sniper ops in that area, especially because the election was happening. So we were going out in the area, and everyone was getting rocketed. Abu Ghraib was getting rocketed all day, and I remembered I had a little fire support book in all my gear. I remembered we got rocketed that day after we went in, and that imam had his head cut off, and we were doing patrols, and I had 5 vehicles after that got mortared that day. I'm not even going to talk about our transition from MAC kits to up armored. We were out in the AO and flexi fiberglass Humvees in the beginning with up armored kits. But I lost 5 vehicles that next day that just got mortared because they were just like waiting for us. But we got mortared that day, and something went off in my head. I'm like, you know what? The hell with this. After the mortar happened, we had 5 or 6 mortars went off. I went out and I got a team together, and I'm like, we're going to go do crater analysis.
Yeah.
So no one had taught me. No one told me. I just remember crater analysis from artillery school. And
It's a thing.
I had time on my hands. So I went out and I looked up crater analysis, and I started finding the crater. I go, hey, look where the mortars landed. So we found the mortar fins from all the fins, and I knew that this was a 60 or an 81s or a 120. So I knew how far they had to be employed, and they would fire 5 or 6 rounds at us. So I got a good group of information to do resections, and I started coming back and putting them in the computer systems we had that I won't get into. And I started saying, hey, if I'm a fire support guy and I have this amount of this weapon system, I'm going to go right here to fire on us. So I made up all this information, developed a whole plan, a whole mission, I was the XO at the time, talked to the CO, like, hey, sir, I think we can make an impact here. Sent out the sniper teams. I kind of looked at where I thought that they would be firing in defilades and roads of access and where they were firing from. Sent out the sniper teams in these different spots and houses. So the Marines went out and took houses. And they made people just stay. Hey, we're going to feed you, but you can't go out. You can't go anywhere. Just stay here. Stayed in these positions. And lo and behold, what do you know? A team comes up, pulls out a little 60 knee mortar, pulls it out of the back, drops 3 mortars on us. My sniper teams take fire, start shooting them. They just annihilated 2 or 3 guys. They're like, holy shit, this worked. It was like a team of 6. They took some of the initial mortar guys. They took them out. Mm-hmm. There was a canal by there. They got in a huge firefight. And the reason I'm talking about this mission, it's on one of the History Channel shootouts. So if it's not classified, it's on. I have it somewhere, DVD. It's Sergeant Cucker told the History Channel shootout about it. So I'm not saying anything is classified. They talk about this whole mission on a shootout on History Channel. So they get in a huge firefight. We reinforce them in the canal. They're lobbing, literally hand-to-hand fighting, lobbing grenades and shooting people in these canals and rivers. And then we discovered the little GPS pluggers, Garmin pluggers. We discovered coordinates of positions, all this information on these guys, just a treasure trove of information, and pretty much stopped the mortar and rocket attacks on Abu Ghraib for the elections.
That's legit.
My only regret to that is we had an engineer that got attached to us during that mission to do stuff, and it was his platoon commander brought him to us, said he wanted to go out the recon, and he said, hey, he wants to go out and do some of the recon before he goes back. He goes back to Camp Lejeune like in a week or 2, transitioning out. I'm like, man, I don't think this is good for him. It should just come. It's not like we don't get in firefights. Every time we go out to firefight, and I don't want him this short to the house.
Yeah.
To risk it. And he's like, no. And he was there. He's like, no, please, sir, I want to go out. So I put him with Cucker and Langto to make sure that he got with the senior team. Mm-hmm. But he got killed on that raid. When they went to the canal to reinforce, Cucker and them positioned their vehicle on a side to take fire, and everyone jumped out on one side, and he told everyone, if I position the vehicle this way, his organic team knew to jump out this way. And the engineer jumped out and he got lit up by the guys, unfortunately. And I planned that mission. Sucks. So there's a lot of, from soup to nuts, I planned that mission. And that mission went down, Langto and them jumped out, but I want to give, Knife Magazine has this too. Knife Magazine has a story. Sergeant Langto was in that firefight. They were pulling the bodies, doing sensitive site exploitation. And Langto goes in the water and he takes all his gear off, and he goes in the water to grab one of the insurgents. And when he pulled a bunch of dead insurgents out, he went to grab this one insurgent, and the guy comes around and grabs him by the face.
Oh shit.
So he's in the canal, no gear, no rifle, no weapon, in his boots and utes, grabbing this guy. This was a bad idea for him to attack Langto, because Langto was just this brick shithouse. Langto and all the Marines, they go to shoot at, but they're like, we're going to hit Langto. We can't shoot. So they're on the banks and like, oh, we can't shoot. Langto takes this guy underwater, separates his head from his body, and brings him up.
Holy fuck, dude. That's a very reconnaissance thing to do.
The last place you want to get in a fight with a Recon Marine is
in the water.
It's in the water. Langto had, from Camp Fallujah's PX, he had one of those CRTK knives.
Oh, yeah.
Knives. He had it on his pant pockets. That's all he had. He took this guy underwater and
decapitated him? Holy
shit. His head was coming off. And then brought him up. And they're like, Langto, you okay? He's like, fuck this guy. He brought this guy up on the water. But Langto, I don't know if that's in any place. I wrote him up for a Silver Star for that, which I think he got later. Langto, as the only person I know, hand-to-hand combat, knife fight in a canal as a Recon Marine. And this was on the shootout, and this was in Knife magazine. So I hope I didn't give up any declassified material. And I know
that's crazy.
But Lengto, like, you know, this guy had just tried to kill us. He was legit insurgent. This guy was playing possum in the reeds in the canal. Lengto handled business, man. And like I said, he got a Silver Star for that later. Hand-to-hand knife fight with an insurgent.
Well, that's good he got awarded. You know, a lot of times those actions get kind of, because of everything else that happens on a deployment like that, you know, it kind of gets overshadowed a little bit. But that's fucking legit, man. I'm surprised. I feel like that would be like a legendary story that probably goes around the reconnaissance circles every once in a while. Like, remember that one guy that did that thing?
Well, I hope it does now, because like I said, the shootout, I could send you the shootout. That's the History Channel, because Cucker sent me the DVD for it. I asked Cucker, like, hey, I don't know what's classified or not, so don't use my name in it. So Cucker didn't use my name and stuff in it, but he sent me the magazine too, the Blade magazine, that talks about that whole thing. But yeah, Lengto was, I mean, he was a legend in our battalion of, like, you literally fight at an insurgent.
That's crazy.
So the last place to get in a fight or a SEAL is in the water, because you're basically drown proof.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Standing next to me and I got to fight you here, I'm just going to go in the water, because I've been shallow water blackout 3 times where they drown your ass. So I'm not gonna,
you're used to it. You know what's going to happen.
But that was a cool mission, with the fact that we did some fire support ops. And then I started training the Marines to do crater analysis. And we went back and I did a whole PowerPoint presentation at the battalion with all the Marines. I'm like, hey, use your computer ability and your ability to do crater analysis and go out. And then we started going out, and instead of counter battery radar, we almost go out, drive the AO, make them mortar us, do a crater analysis, and then find out where they're going, and then just swack their ass. And then that was standard SOP. That became SOP for 3rd Recon coming in and other units around us. And it was just one of these small fire support, like World War II, Korea War thing that you think you'll never use.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I had, you know, combat's a lot of boredom. And I was just literally in our platoon rock, like, I'm going to go to crater analysis. And it turned out to be one of the best things. And one of the lieutenants later that did some stuff, he took the whole brief and he tried to go to the Pentagon and get it like SOP for units going over. But it never took off. I don't think people saw a lot of...
I've only heard of one other guy that did a crater analysis. When I first got to 210, there was a staff sergeant there who, because we were like, this dude has a NAM with a V, but he didn't have a combat action ribbon. And we're like, that's weird. You know, how did that occur? And he talks about how they were getting mortared, and he ran out and did a crater analysis while they were still being mortared, and they to try to get the return fire on them, or counter battery fire on them. And so he got a NAM with a V for doing that, but he didn't return fire or whatever the rules were at the time for the award. So he was a very disgruntled person for the fact that he never got his combat action ribbon, even though he was out there doing mortar crater analysis under fire.
I tell you, it's a rudimentary skill, but we would go do it. We did it one time, and I had a really cool story about an F-18 doing a strafing run. It showed up. It was it had done air for somebody else. We became under attack because we were trying to get them to mortar us. Mm-hmm. We became into a complex ambush with mortars and machine gun fire, and they were in defilade on the other side of a road in a canal. And after returning a little bit of fire, this F-18, thank God it showed up, because you might talk shit about aviation, but you love them on station. He had no munitions, but he had guns still. And he was doing strafing runs with his 20 millimeter cannon. He could see the bad guys on the other side. He was just doing runs, just back and forth. But we started taking fire, doing crater analysis, and started getting mortared again. I'm like, oh shit, they're shooting at us. And then I was taking fire, and all of a sudden, our air officer goes, hey, there's F-18. I'm like, okay, I had an imbiter, and I'm just talking. It just showed up with comms. I could talk to a F-18 with imbiters. I'm like, hey, this is Flash. And he's like, I see where you're being attacked from. And I just started giving them a 9-line. He's like, he didn't need it. He saw the bad guys. Just started doing strafing runs with a 20 millimeter on the other side of this canal while we're trying to do crater analysis.
That's legit, man. Well, man, I think this is a good spot to kind of pause, and maybe we'll have you come back on and we'll go through some more of these stories, because this is all super interesting stuff. You know, this is all like, what have we talked about? We've had Recon Marines knife fighting in canals, boat raids, you know, Fallujah assaults and close air support there. mortar, crater analysis and stuff like that. Like we've gone through a whole spectrum of stuff, and I think the audience is really going to appreciate this podcast. But I would like last time we talked about them, we're around just over almost 2.5 hours. So I'd hate for any more of the story to get lost for people that don't listen to the whole thing. So if you don't mind, like to pause and have you come back on later on, and we'll get into some more stuff.
Sure.
Cool.
I just wanted to give some of the stuff I didn't get to talk about last time of the missions and things that we get to do, so people get some of the quote unquote sexy stuff that.
Yeah, people need to hear that stuff, because I'll tell you, how we had talked before about Recon kind of, being the bastard children of like SOCOM or whatever, even though they're not in SOCOM, so they don't really get to do a lot of cool missions, like some of the other units do. You gotta hear that these stories. You gotta hear that some of these things actually occur, because some of these guys come in hoping to do some of this stuff, and they don't now, especially nowadays with the wars are basically over. The odds of them getting to do something like that's pretty rare. And honestly, I think a lot of guys in Recon get kind of tired of what we had talked about before, where they're not being utilized properly, and they have them. A lot of those guys get out and go over to Army SF or go over to do something else because they want to feel like they're being utilized, and they have all these awesome skills, or as trained as anybody else. Oh, sorry for the noise. My dog is over here. They have all these awesome skills and stuff, but they're just not being utilized. So it's good to hear about it. But anyway, he's trying to get me to take him out, so he's like bumping into everything. So I'm gonna cut it here. I appreciate you coming on, man. We'll set something up for episode 3, and everything like that. So is there anything you want to toss out there before we get off here?
No, I appreciate you having me on. This was probably the first time I've talked about a lot of this stuff, and if I don't say names and stuff, I want to give a lot of credit to the Marines that were involved in this, because I know Marines, being a former enlisted Marine, I know they always talk about all the officers get all the glory and the medals and ribbons and badges, but it's really the junior level Marines that did all the work in this stuff. I'm just a facilitator, a cog in the wheel. So if I brush over a lot of the casualties or anything, it's because I don't like to talk about that stuff as much. So I try to stay involved in the stuff that doesn't take me bad places. So, but I want to give credit to a lot of the Marines I served with, even if I don't use their names. They were the main effort, and I was lucky enough to get to serve with some of the best guys at the wrong or right time, and it was my highest honor of my life, honestly. And I was very fortunate to get to do what I did when I did, and come out relatively unscathed. I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that didn't, and I think you talking about just the guys getting injured and killed and stuff like that, and then some of the great stuff guys have done. That's what this is about. This is honoring people's memories and honoring people's legacy, because people deserve to have their story told, especially if they did something heroic. There's no reason why that people shouldn't know, the above and beyond actions that they took while they were serving their country and stuff like that. So again, I appreciate you coming on and shining some light on some of these details. I mean, you've had I want to say you've had the craziest career that I've seen of anyone, between all the different job changes and operations and stuff that you've been involved in. It's been pretty interesting to learn more about you and stuff. And I look forward to our next time on. For everyone else out there, as always, hit up my website, jkramergraphics.com, and my Instagram's @formeractionguys and @jkramergraphics. And other than that, I guess we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate your time, brother.
For sure, dude. Hey, have a good weekend, or good week, I guess.
You too. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.